Chapter 8:28. At the thought of this, Feng Zichen waved his sleeves and swept out a strong gust of wind, shattering the Khanate Dao pattern that was falling towards the clan derived from Pangu's bloodline. Since you were born in Mount Buzhou, you shall be called the Buzhou Celestial Race. Ignoring the Heavenly Dao's reaction, Feng Zichen gave the new race a name. It was the Buzhou Celestial Race. The celestial race that was born in Mount Buzhou. The moment the name was given, heaven and earth immediately sensed it and began to rumble. Even the unusually furious ruins of Mount Buzhou fell silent after hearing the name. Obviously, it had acknowledged the name. The Heavenly Dao saw all the strange phenomena and immediately knew that the matter was settled and there was no possibility of changing it. Therefore, the Heavenly Dao first looked coldly at Feng Zichen and then released a wave of Khanate Dao pattern that turned into a Khanate Divine pattern. It represented the Buzhou Celestial Race. When the Khanate Divine pattern fell, heaven and earth acknowledged the identity of the Buzhou Celestial Race. Now, there was another Khanate race in the Eldritch world. Rumble. Above the firmament, boundless luck and merit gathered and merged with the luck of the Buzhou Celestial Race. This was the legacy of Mount Buzhou. The Buzhou Celestial Race inherited Pangu's bloodline and had the name Buzhou. Naturally, they could inherit the legacy of Mount Buzhou. Compared to Mount Buzhou, the Essence Demon race was not so lucky. After losing Pangu's bloodline, they only had the bloodline of the Chaos Demon God in their bodies, and had completely become the descendants of the Chaos Demon God. At this time, the descendants of the Chaos Demon God were not as hated by the Heavenly Dao as they were in the Primordial Age. On the contrary, their tragic situation attracted the pity of the Heavenly Dao, and it was prepared to secretly support them. However, at this time, the pity of the Heavenly Dao obviously had no effect, because the one who wanted to deal with the Essence Demon race was none other than the ruins of Mount Buzhou that gave birth to them. In terms of hatred for the Chaos Demonic Gods, who among the people present hated the ruins of Mount Buzhou more than they did? Mount Buzhou was destroyed by the corrosion of the Chaos Demonic God on the surface, but in reality, Mount Buzhou was destroyed by the corrosion of the Chaos Demonic God. With such a great enmity, the Mount Buzhou ruins hated the Chaos Demon Gods very much. They wished that they could all die. Therefore, how could the descendants of the Chaos Fiend God, the Primordial Demon Clan, fare well in front of the ruins of Mount Buzhou? He had defended the Yuan race earlier because they had Pangu's bloodline in them, but the Yuan race did not. If that was the case, why would the ruins of Mount Buzhou shelter the Prime Devil Clan? He couldn't wait to kill them. Rumble. Boundless resentment gathered in the sky and surged toward the Primordial Demon Clan, entangling them tightly. This was the resentment of Mount Buzhou, the resentment that could not be erased after its destruction. The Buzhou God clan had inherited the fate and merit left by the ruins of Mount Buzhou and could enjoy its legacy. The only thing the Primordial Demon Clan could inherit was the resentment of Mount Buzhou. This resentment was the curse of Mount Buzhou on the Chaos Demonic God. It would entangle every living being of the Primordial Demon Clan until they became Primordial Daluo Jinxian or died completely. Feng Zichen could not tell what kind of effect this resentment would have on the Primordial Demon Clan at the moment. He could only roughly tell that with the resentment of Mount Buzhou, the Primordial Demon Clan would probably never be able to set foot on the earth in this lifetime. Mount Buzhou was the foundation of the earth and the ancestral bloodline of the untainted land. Being cursed by it, they would be hated by the entire untainted land and would never be able to set foot on the earth in this lifetime. Once they touched the earth, they would be eroded by the evil spirit of the earth, which would enter their souls and destroy all vitality. How pitiful! And this was only one of the many side effects of being cursed by Mount Buzhou. As for the rest, before Feng Zichen could see clearly, the Primordial Demon Clan had already disappeared. Why did they disappear? Naturally, it was because the Heavenly Axiom was worried that they would be secretly killed by the people present if they continued to stay here. Therefore, the Heavenly Axiom directly used its magical power to secretly send the Primordial Demon Clan away, and used Supreme means to cover their tracks, making it impossible for the people to divine their whereabouts. From this, it could be seen that the Heavenly Axiom was still unwilling to give up. It still pinned its hopes on the Primordial Demon Clan, believing that they could hinder the development of the human race. What a joke! It was just the primordial demon clan. If they had not been cursed by Mount Buzhou, they might have had a chance to rise again. But now that they had been cursed by Mount Buzhou, they would never have a chance to rise again in this lifetime. It was even to the extent that whether they would be able to survive in the 3 dimensions was a question that was worth considering. Being hated by the earth and unable to set foot on the earth in this lifetime, if such a race could rise again, wouldn't it mean that the other races were useless? The heavenly axiom was too confident. However, it was better to be safe than sorry. What if the heavenly axiom had some tricks up its sleeve that it did not know about? It had to be guarded against. More preparations had to be made. Everything had to be prepared. This was the reason why Feng Zichen had not failed so far. At that thought, Feng Zichen suddenly turned to the people of the Buzhou divine clan not far away and asked, "Did you see the primordial demon clan that just left?" The first member of the Buzhou divine clan to be born heard Feng Zichen's question and hurriedly stepped forward and bowed respectfully. "Reporting to Godfather, we saw them." "Godfather. That's right. Godfather." Although the Buzhou divine clan was created by everyone's joint efforts, Feng Zichen had contributed greatly. Moreover, if Feng Zichen had not extracted the Pangu bloodline from the primordial demon clan, the Buzhou divine clan would not have been born and everyone would not have worked together to create this clan. For this reason, it was not a problem to say that the Buzhou divine clan was created by Feng Zichen. It was also because of this that it was completely reasonable for the people of the Buzhou divine clan to address Feng Zichen as Godfather. No one could find fault with that. Feng Zichen did not deny that person's address. He nodded and said, "It's good that you saw them. You have to remember that they are your natural enemies, If you see them in the future, if you have the ability to kill them, do not hesitate to kill them directly. If you don't have the ability to kill them, then avoid them, lest you fall into their hands and suffer a fate worse than death." Feng Zichen's words were not meant to frighten them, nor were they meant to deceive the Buzhou divine clan. There was a reason behind them. The 2 clans were indeed natural enemies. This was something that Feng Zichen had discovered by accident when he was calculating the effects of Mount Buzhou's curse on the primordial demon clan. The primordial demon clan's method of dispelling Mount Buzhou's curse was actually on the Buzhou divine clan. This was also the reason why the 2 clans were mortal enemies. After hearing Feng Zichen's instructions, the first person of the Buzhou divine clan did not understand, but he still said respectfully, "We will remember Godfather's words and will not dare to forget them. If we meet the primordial demon clan in the future, we will definitely kill them." Afraid that the Buzhou divine clan did not understand the gravity of the situation and did not take his words to heart, Feng Zichen reminded them again and explained the reason. "Although your bloodline is different from that of the primordial demon clan, you were all born from the ruins of Mount Buzhou. It's just that you all have Pangu's bloodline and were born to be loved by Mount Buzhou and received its legacy. But the primordial demon clan is different. Possessing the bloodline of the Chaos Fiend God, they were born to be disliked by Mount Buzhou and were cursed by Mount Buzhou to never set foot on the earth. The primordial demon clan was born with misfortune and should have been exterminated. But the heavens were kind and not only saved their lives, but also told them a way to dispel the curse of Mount Buzhou." At this point, Feng Zichen looked at all the Buzhou divine clan members and said, "That way is you all. As long as they devour your bloodline, the primordial demon clan will undergo an astonishing transformation and dispel the curse of Mount Buzhou in their bodies. Therefore, if you see the primordial demon clan in the future and you can't kill them, run as far as you can. Otherwise, once you fall into the hands of the primordial demon clan, you will suffer a fate worse than death. They are your natural enemies. Your 2 clans are destined to never coexist. Only one of you can survive, either you or them." All this information was deduced by Feng Zichen and could be confirmed to be true. Could only be said that the heavenly Tao really knew how to play games. To think that it could come up with such a method to give birth to the real primordial demon clan. If the primordial demon clan devoured the bloodline of the Buzhou divine clan and became the leader of the 2 clans, wouldn't they become the primordial demon clan when they grew a 3rd eye? Unfortunately, although the Heavenly Tao's plan was good, it was seen through by Feng Zichen and was destined to lose its effect. Feng Zichen didn't do anything, but an inexplicable force emanated from his body and surged in the direction of the Buzhou divine clan in the distance. Soon, it sank into their bodies and disappeared. Feng Zichen didn't do anything but set a restriction on the Buzhou divine clan members. This restriction wouldn't affect them and would only be activated when they died, melting their flesh and blood so that they would return to heaven and earth without leaving a trace. This had always been the case for the descendants of the Pangu. After death, their origin would return to heaven and earth. This was called returning to the embrace of their father. This tradition originated from the witch tribe and was one of the few virtues of the witch tribe. This was a very good tradition. Feng Zichen thought that the Buzhou divine clan should learn from the witch tribe and imitated the witch tribe's return to heaven and earth after death to set a restriction on them. In this way, the Heavenly Tao's plan naturally fell apart. This time, all of the Heavenly Tao's plans fell through as Feng Zichen dispelled them one by one. In this game with the Heavenly Tao, Feng Zichen was ultimately superior and won the Heavenly Tao. From then on, Feng Zichen had a new title, Feng Zichen, who won the Heavenly Tao by half a step. After hearing Feng Zichen's words, the members of the Buzhou divine clan all paled. No one would be happy to have an enemy out of nowhere, let alone a newborn of the Buzhou divine clan. The first person of the Buzhou divine race, who was slightly older, quickly calmed down and thanked Feng Zichen respectfully. "Thank you for your guidance, Divine Father. Otherwise, we wouldn't have known that we had become the savior of others. It seems that the Buzhou divine clan will not be able to coexist with the primordial demon clan in the future. If I find the opportunity in the future, I'll make this clan disappear completely." The first half of the sentence was directed at Feng Zichen, but the second half was what he thought in his heart and didn't say out loud. However, although he didn't speak, Feng Zichen already knew what he was thinking just from the look in his eyes. He was also a decisive person with the potential to become a king. He should be the clan leader of the Buzhou celestial race. Thinking of this, Feng Zichen suddenly said, "I see that you don't have a name yet. From now on you shall be called No, the No from Mount Buzhou. The Buzhou divine clan shall be under your command from now on." No quickly knelt down and thanked. "No, thank you, Father, for the name." Smiling, Feng Zichen first helped No up with his magic power, then picked out the second and third members of the Buzhou divine clan and named them Zhou and Shan, respectively, so that they could assist No in managing the Buzhou divine clan. No from Mount Buzhou, Zhou from Mount Buzhou, and Shan from Mount Buzhou. Feng Zichen named them so casually, using local materials to save time. But he also had his own way of saying that Mount Buzhou was a very vivid name. He gave the three of them such names to commemorate Mount Buzhou. After naming the three of them, Feng Zichen pointed to the sky and plucked the supreme-grade primordial spiritual treasure seal of mountains and rivers that was still floating in mid-air, and handed it to No. "This is your clan's primordial spiritual treasure, the seal of mountains and rivers. It is very powerful. Today I give it to you. I hope that you can keep the peace of the Buzhou divine clan with this treasure." The seal of mountains and rivers was still there, but the great spear of destruction was no longer there. It had disappeared with the disappearance of the primordial demon clan. Obviously, it had been taken away by the primordial demon clan. The innate divine first Dai Yuan gave birth to two supreme-grade primordial spiritual treasures. One was the supreme-grade primordial spiritual treasure seal of mountains and rivers nurtured by Mount Buzhou, which represented the inheritance of Pangu in his body. The other was the supreme-grade primordial spiritual treasure Great Spear of Destruction formed by the power of chaos and destruction, which represented the inheritance of the chaos demon god in his body. Now, First Dai Yuan's bloodline was divided into two, creating two primordial clans. It was suitable for each clan to have one primordial spiritual treasure. After doing all this, Feng Zichen still felt uneasy. After what happened just now, he realized that he had underestimated the Heavenly Tao. It was also a cunning old man who was very good at scheming. If he was not careful, he would fall into his trap. To guard against the Heavenly Tao, he had to add another layer of insurance. With a thought, Feng Zichen thought of an idea that would satisfy both sides. He pointed at Taoist Buzhou, who was beside Great Emperor Ziwei, and said, "Buzhou, come here." Hearing this, Taoist Buzhou stepped forward and asked respectfully, "Uncle Master, what instructions do you have for me?" Feng Zichen smiled and pointed at the Buzhou divine clan in front of him. He said, "Now that I have worldly affairs to deal with, I have no time to care about this clan. Coincidentally, this clan is somewhat related to you. Therefore, I'll entrust this clan to you and let you teach them. What do you think?" Hearing Feng Zichen's words, Taoist Buzhou subconsciously wanted to refuse. P.S. Double monthly votes for today. Please give monthly votes. Chapter 8:29. It wasn't that he didn't like the Buzhou divine clan, but Taoist Buzhou had just been born and didn't know anything. He was still fumbling around, so how could he teach others? However, before Taoist Buzhou could refuse, Great Emperor Ziwei reprimanded him. "Child, you are so ignorant. Your Uncle Master is giving you a great opportunity. Hurry up and thank him." What great opportunity! The Buzhou divine clan was born with part of the legacy of Mount Buzhou. They had the remaining luck and merit of Mount Buzhou, which was what Taoist Buzhou needed to achieve Tao. Now, the Buzhou divine clan had been recognized by heaven and earth and had become a part of the three realms. Outsiders couldn't kill them for no reason. Otherwise, they would attract the revenge of Pangu. However, if he couldn't kill them, how could Taoist Buzhou take back the luck? He could only use other methods. This was the opportunity that Feng Zichen wanted to give to Taoist Buzhou. Educate the Buzhou divine clan. If Taoist Buzhou could complete the task of educating the Buzhou divine clan, then the legacy of Mount Buzhou that he lacked would naturally return to him. He could even gain a lot of merit because of this. Taoist Buzhou was born divine. At first, he might not have understood the deeper meaning of Feng Zichen's actions. However, after being reminded by Great Emperor Ziwei, he immediately understood. He quickly cupped his hands and thanked him. "Thank you for your help, Uncle Master." Then, Taoist Buzhou promised, "Leave the Buzhou divine clan to me. Don't worry, Uncle Master. I won't let them suffer." Seeing this, Feng Zichen nodded and said with a smile, "You and the Buzhou divine clan are of the same origin. I am indeed relieved to leave them to you. Moreover, you are Taoist Ziwei's disciple. In this vast, untainted world, his name is much more useful than mine. With his protection, as long as you don't go overboard, no one will dare to find trouble with you even if you want to in the three realms." After being teased by Feng Zichen, Taoist Buzhou quickly said, "You must be joking, Uncle Master. How can I be a bully?" Although he said that, Taoist Buzhou was still shocked by Feng Zichen's words. As a newborn, he instinctively knew that his master was very strong. However, he didn't know how strong his master was. The so-called Heavenly Tao's inheritance stopped at the Taoist priests, which meant that the Tao's inheritance could only reach the level of the Daluo Taoist priest's Taoist. Taoist Buzhou's the Taoist Tao, and the primordial Daluo. The newly born innate gods weren't aware of it as they didn't have it in their heritage and had no use for it. In the eyes of Taoist Buzhou, who was just a Tai Jingxian, the primordial Taoist priests were already unattainable figures. He felt that his master should be the Daluo Taoist priests, and he should be one of the best. However, at this moment, with Feng Zichen's words and what Taoist Buzhou saw just now, a doubt lingered in his heart. Was his master really just the Daluo Taoist priests? It was not written in the inheritance that the Daluo Taoist priests had the power to fight against the heavenly Tao. Thinking of the scene of his master facing the heavenly Tao alone just now, Taoist Buzhou couldn't help but be fascinated. Moreover, Martial Uncle had just said that master's reputation was very great, enough to protect him without any scruples. What did this mean? It meant that his master was very strong and was a figure at the top of this world. Otherwise, how could he be so strong? This world was much more mysterious than he had imagined. Taoist Buzhou thought silently as he looked at the terrifying figures beside him, who he couldn't see through but were like the incarnations of the great Tao. Were these people really the Daluo Taoist priests? Or was the Daluo Taoist priests really that strong? Just as Taoist Buzhou was imagining things, Great Emperor Ziwei spoke. Fellow Taoist Gaochen, don't talk nonsense. In terms of reputation, how can I be compared to you? Let me ask all the fellow Taoists present, who would dare to provoke you? Your reputation is great. Even the Tao ancestor would frown when he heard your name. I'm not that capable. With that, Great Emperor Ziwei reminded Taoist Buzhou. Buzhou, remember this Uncle Master Gaochen in front of you. You must visit him often in the future so that you can get familiar with him. In this way, if you encounter any trouble that you can't solve in the future, just mention his name. I guarantee that it'll be more useful than my name. This was not a joke. Great Emperor Ziwei only had great merit, a noble status, and unfathomable strength. However, in terms of reputation, his reputation was indeed not as good as Feng Zichen's. To be precise, Feng Zichen's reputation was unparalleled in the Eldritch world. This was not a boast, but a real battle. In the Eldritch world, there was no one else with a battle record as glorious as Feng Zichen's. Before he attained the Tao, he dared to fight with the Eastern Emperor Tai. After attaining the Tao, he was even more impressive. He had fought with the saints several times, and he did not suffer any losses each time. Instead, he made the saints embarrassed. Everyone knew that Feng Zichen was the most ferocious person in the Eldritch world. He was known as the first face-slapping saint in the Eldritch world. Indeed, no one with great magical powers dared to provoke such a person. When facing the saints, they dared to fight at the slightest disagreement, not to mention them. Even if they were beaten to death, they would be unlucky. No one dared to take revenge for them. The two's business flattery directly confused Taoist Buzhou. Seeing how exaggerated they were, he did not know whether to believe them or not. However, Taoist Buzhou secretly glanced at the expressions of the surrounding great magical powers. After hearing his master's words, they all showed a deep expression of agreement. He could not help but believe his master's words. It seemed that the truth was so exaggerated. His uncle master was not an ordinary person. Like his master, he was a top figure in the world. Poor Taoist Buzhou. He had just been born. Before he understood the situation of the three realms and the experts in the three realms, he was dragged here by his unreliable master to watch a big show. When he met people, he did not introduce himself. He just pointed at them and called them seniors, uncle masters, and uncle masters. He did not say anything about their origins and strength. This confused Taoist Buzhou. At this moment, he really did not know the origins of the people in front of him. If he knew, he would probably be shocked. The people in front of Taoist Buzhou were more than just the top existences in the world. It could be said that more than 90% of the experts in the old untainted land were gathered here. This gathering could be said to be the most complete gathering of the experts in the untainted land. It would be difficult for such a grand occasion to happen again. As soon as Taoist Buzhou was born, he saw such a scene. Could be said that it was also an opportunity. Unfortunately, the current him was still muddle-headed. He had no idea what kind of existences he was facing. After exchanging compliments with Feng Zichen, Great Emperor Ziwei seemed to have thought of something. He reminded Taoist Buzhou, not only your Uncle Master Gaochen, but also your other Uncle Masters. You should also get close to them. They are all the top existences in the world. They are immortal saints and the rulers of the untainted land. If you have a good relationship with them, you can really do whatever you want in the untainted land. As he spoke, Great Emperor Ziwei pushed Taoist Buzhou and asked him to bow to the three pure ones. Taoist Buzhou was very obedient. He did whatever Great Emperor Ziwei asked him to do. He quickly bowed to the three pure ones. To be honest, the three pure ones did not want to accept Taoist Buzhou's bow at all. This was because they knew that if they accepted this bow, they would not be able to refuse Taoist Buzhou if he came to them for help in the future. Unfortunately, in front of so many people, the three pure ones could not bring themselves to refuse Taoist Buzhou's bow. They could only accept it. Seeing these two people speaking one after another and roasting them on the fire, the three pure ones could not help but feel a little unhappy. Therefore, they heard Heavenly Lord of Yuanshi say in a strange tone, "Martial nephew Buzhou, your master is right. If you run into trouble, you can use your martial Uncle Gauchen's name. It's definitely useful. It's much more useful than our names. After Heavenly Lord of Yuanshi finished speaking, without waiting for Taoist Buzhou to reply, Feng Zichen also said in a strange tone, "Haha, Saint Yuqing is really good at joking. If my name is really so useful, then some people would not have repeatedly targeted the human clan." As soon as he said this, Heavenly Lord of Yuanshi's expression changed. He pointed at Feng Zichen and was so angry that he could not speak. On the side, seeing that the atmosphere was getting more and more tense, someone did not want to get involved. He quickly said, "Fellow Taoists, this matter is over. I should also take my leave." After saying this, that person directly tore open the space and left. And this person's departure seemed to have activated a certain signal. After a while, several people took their leave. Soon, more than half of the people present had left. And with the departure of the crowd, the situation that was getting more and more tense was also diluted. Humph! Worried that if he continued to stay here, he would give Great Emperor Ziwei an opportunity to take advantage of him. The Heavenly Lord of Yuanshi snorted coldly and left with Saint Taiqing and Saint Shangqing. After the three pure ones left, almost everyone present left in an instant. Then, Goddess Nuwa wanted to protect Fuxi, so she also took her leave. Goddess Hutu was anxious to check the situation in the underworld, so she also returned to the underworld. In a short while, only Feng Zichen and Great Emperor Ziwei's forces were left. Fuxi was about to attain the Tao. This was a major event for the human clan. Feng Zichen, the sacred emperor of the human clan, was bound to have a training ground. For this, he also proposed to leave. "Taoist Ziwei, I'll leave Buzhou God clan to you. I still have something to do, so I'll take my leave first." With that, Feng Zichen directly left with Shino and Shenyuan. After Feng Zichen left, Great Emperor Ziwei was not in a hurry to leave. Instead, he looked at the ruins of Mount Buzhou under his feet. Sigh! To think that the former Holy Land would end up like this. It's really sad. Looking at the ruins of Mount Buzhou that were filled with murderous aura, resentment, and destructive power, Great Emperor Ziwei couldn't help but shake his head. Then he stretched out his hand and drew in the void repeatedly. Endless starlight was drawn from the boundless starry sky, forming an innate four-spirits formation that sealed the ruins of Mount Buzhou. Rumble! The moment the innate four-spirits formation was formed, endless power of earth, fire, water, and wind surged. The entire void began to close, sealing the ruins of Mount Buzhou and gradually disappearing. In this place, the chi of the chaotic demon god and the power of Pangu collided and conflicted with each other, producing a large amount of destructive power. If ordinary Daluo Taoist priests came here, they would probably die here if they were careless. In order to prevent future generations from accidentally entering this place without knowing the danger, and also to prevent the incident of the Yuan clan from happening again, Great Emperor Ziwei decided to seal the ruins of Mount Buzhou and not let this place appear in the world. At the same time, Great Emperor Ziwei had another purpose for sealing this place with the innate four spirits formation. He was trying to convert the power of the four spirits through this formation, and then use the power of earth, fire, water, and wind to continuously baptize this place and slowly refine the power of the chaotic demon god here, returning it to chaos and restoring Mount Buzhou to its former glory. Although the power of the chaotic demon god was strong, its power came from chaos after all. Great Emperor Ziwei used the power of earth, fire, water, and wind to create chaos, using chaos to break chaos. Sooner or later, he would be able to refine it all. It was just that this would take a long time, so he had to wait slowly. However, there was no hurry. At Great Emperor Ziwei's level, time had lost its meaning. He could wait slowly. Let's go! After doing all this, Great Emperor Ziwei called out to Taoist Buzhou and prepared to leave with him and the Buzhou Celestial Clan. As for why he brought the Buzhou Celestial Clan along, firstly, it was because Taoist Buzhou had promised Feng Zichen to teach the Buzhou Celestial Clan, so he naturally had to bring them along. Secondly, it was because there was a small Mount Buzhou in the boundless starry sky. There was no other place more suitable for the Buzhou Celestial Clan to live. After this, the primordial world fell into peace again. Oh, it wasn't exactly peaceful. It was just that the big shots had stopped fighting. However, as time passed, more and more living beings were born in the three realms. There were innate god fiends, innate life forms, and even a few innate spiritual treasures. The evolution of countless living beings brought a lot of vitality to the three realms. After 5,000 years, the top-tier innate god fiend favored by the saints was finally born. On Mount Yujing, the supreme divine fetus suddenly burst with dazzling immortal light. Then, like a blooming lotus, it slowly bloomed. Not long after, the divine fetus transformed into a 12th grade immortal lotus. Its petals were engraved with immortal Tao imprints, emitting dazzling immortal light. As the immortal lotus bloomed, a surge of innate Taoist rhymes suddenly spread, creating a boundless vision. Looking at its aura, it wasn't hard to tell that it was a superior grade innate spiritual treasure. In the center of the immortal lotus on the lotus platform sat a young Taoist. He was dressed in white and had a handsome face. His entire body was enveloped in immortal light, and countless immortal shadows appeared behind him. This was the divine fetus of Mount Yujing, a natural-born immortal lord. His name was Boom Boom Boom. The will of heaven descended and turned into a majestic voice. Yujing! The innate god-fiend born from Mount Yujing was called Yujing. Chapter 830. Since he was born with the destiny of the celestial way, Yujing's fortune naturally exceeded that of the Khanate godfiends. After he was born, the purple clouds on Mount Yujing suddenly trembled and condensed into a ball. They turned into a celestial talisman and landed in his hand. The purple cloud celestial talisman was formed by the purple cloud palace's aura combined with the Khanate purple cloud. Internally, this talisman could calm one's mind and block all external demons. Externally, this talisman could borrow a bit of the purple cloud palace's power. Its defense was unparalleled, and it could also suppress enemies. This treasure was a rare superior-grade Khanate spiritual treasure. Together with the grade 12 celestial lotus under Yujing's feet, he was born with a total of 2 superior-grade Khanate spiritual treasures. It was very extraordinary. The primordial world had its own rules. Supreme-grade Khanate spiritual treasures were only qualified to be born with natural saints. And top-tier Khanate godfiends were basically born with a superior-grade Khanate spiritual treasure or a middle-grade Khanate spiritual treasure. And for someone like Yujing, who was born with 2 superior-grade Khanate spiritual treasures, this treatment was already the best among the top-tier Khanate godfiends. Not long after Yujing was born, the other Khanate godfiends were born one after another. On Mount Shouyang, the Khanate brass meridian vibrated and a golden divine dragon flew out. Under the sunlight, its golden scales reflected a bright golden light. Roar! A shocking dragon roar was heard, and it was filled with endless majesty. Another top-tier Khanate godfiend was born. Before the heavenly Tao gave him a name, the Grand Pure One had already said, "Your name is Byring." Good fellow, the Grand Pure One was really casual with his name. He directly used the name of the sect as his disciple's Taoist name. However, thinking about Xuandu's Taoist name, there was nothing strange. Xuandu, wasn't that the name of the Grand Pure One's sect? Perhaps the next time the Grand Pure One took in a disciple, his name might be Tusida. The divine dragon, Byring, circled in the air for a while before transforming into a golden-armored god. He held a brass bell in his hand and came in front of the Grand Pure One. He bowed and said, "Disciple Byring greets Master." The golden armor on Bying's body was formed from the Khanate brass essence. It was a middle-grade Khanate spiritual treasure. As for the brass bell in his hand, it was formed from the quintessence of the natural brass, and it was a rare high-grade natural spirit treasure. These 2 magic treasures were born with Bying, and they were his Taoist name Khanate spiritual treasures. With a superior-grade Khanate numinous treasure and a medial-grade Khanate numinous treasure, this was the treatment of a pinnacle Khanate godfiend. Although it was not as good as Yujing, it not far off Xuandu. After the 8 scenes, above the distant eastern sea, the heaven-mending stone suddenly cracked open. A figure covered in multicolored light walked out from within, exuding boundless divine might. He was heaven's heavenly godfiend. Was God-fiend heaven's God-fiends? Was Khanate God-fiend's God-fiend? Remember, it's not called a deity, but called Bu Tian. Heaven heavenly God. S divine heavens. As heavenly heaven. Was merit merit merit? Was heave was merit. It was just that the divine sky-mending stone did not have intelligence, so this merit did not appear. But now, the innate God Tian Bu celestial being born from the divine stone of heaven repairing divine stone was born. Buzz buzz buzz. After the divine being was born, the divine stone that gave birth to him didn't crack. It floated in the air and constantly trembled. Underground, on Flower Fruit Mountain, the ancestral energy of the 10 continents surged and rushed toward the divine stone of sky mending. At the same time, the source energy of the world descended from the sky and poured into the divine stone of heaven mending. Boom! After absorbing these two types of energy, the divine stone of heaven mend underwent a mysterious change. It actually turned into a stone seal with the words, "Mend the heavens," engraved at the bottom. It was surrounded by a 5-colored glow and emitted an indescribable aura as if it could mend the world. The divine seal of heaven patching, a top-tier upper-grade primordial innate spirit treasure, was the primordial spirit treasure of heaven patching divine man. This was also a peak innate god. On the Golden Turtle Island, a supreme formation was operating crazily. Endless chaotic chi surged and drowned the innate godly fetus in the center of the formation. In terms of potential, this innate godly fetus was indeed not as good as Kunlun Mountain's Yujing or Shouyang Mountain's Baiying. However, as a formation grandmaster, Tong Tian had extraordinary means. He used the power of the Jie sect to set up a supreme formation and seized the fortune of the world to change the innate godly fetus's potential. Boom! At a certain moment, the 4 immortal extermination swords vibrated and each of them shot out a sword ray that slashed at the innate godly fetus in the center of the formation. Immediately, the divine fetus exploded and a slender figure walked out with a long sword in hand. His aura was sharp like a divine sword that had just been unsheathed. Taoist Tong Tian was this innate god's name. As for the long sword in his hand, it was called the Immortal Slaying Sword. It was a superior-grade innate spiritual treasure formed by a strand of sword chi from the 4 immortal extermination swords. He was also a peak innate god. In the west, on Mount Meru, the grade 9 golden lotus of merit bloomed silently in the 8 treasures merit pool, releasing endless golden light. And in the golden light, a figure in a golden robe gradually appeared in front of them. He wasn't an innate god born by the world, but a superior-grade innate spiritual root formed by the grade 9 golden lotus of merit. But this didn't mean that he wasn't an innate god. On the contrary, he was also a peak innate god. A supreme-grade innate spiritual root formed an innate saint. If it was a grade 12 golden lotus of merit, even the 3 pure ones would have to address him as a Taoist. Back then, Taoist Black Lotus's grade 12 Black Lotus of Apocalypse was just a Daluo Taoist priest. In the entire demon sect, he was nothing. But in the demon sect, who would dare to underestimate him? With the Daluo Taoist priest's talent, he was the first person to become a high-ranking member of the demon sect. A supreme-grade innate spiritual root formed an innate saint. A superior-grade innate spiritual root formed an innate saint, and a superior-grade innate god. Moreover, the grade 9 virtuous golden lotus was not just a high-grade primordial spiritual root. It was also a high-grade primordial merit spiritual treasure, a supreme-grade primordial merit spiritual treasure. The grade 12 virtuous golden lotus could be considered its offspring. With such an identity, once it formed, it would naturally be a top-notch innate god. It was absolutely noble, even more noble than Jade Capital. This was because the grade 9 golden lotus of merit was a descendant of heaven creation. It was qualified to inherit heaven creation's providence. Pudu. Inexplicably, a voice suddenly reverberated in the void, resonating with the world. Pudu was the name of the person formed by the grade 9 golden lotus of merit. It was given by the heavenly Tao. What a disappointment. He wasn't called Golden Lotus, but Pudu. Pudu meant to wield dharmic powers to liberate all living beings. It was a very meaningful name, and it also confirmed his origin. Golden Lotus of Merit. Rumble. As Pudu was born, all kinds of strange phenomena appeared in the world. The commotion was second only to the birth of Taoist Bujo. That's right, Pudu wasn't a top-notch innate god, but a natural-born saint. As a mere grade 9 golden lotus of merit, Pudu naturally wasn't qualified to become a natural-born saint. But did anyone still remember? In order to allow Pudu to be born in advance, the two saints of the West didn't hesitate to use their saint essences to nurture him. After absorbing the saint essences of two saints in succession, even a pig would change, let alone a grade 9 golden lotus of merit. Naturally, he also underwent an unbelievable transformation, transforming from an innate god to a natural-born saint. Moreover, the grade 9 golden lotus of merit under Pudu's feet also gradually changed. A 10th petal suddenly appeared on the body of the grade 9 virtuous golden lotus, and it went from grade 9 to grade 10. This also caused its grade to rise from a superior grade innate spiritual treasure to a supreme grade innate spiritual treasure. The 10th petal was born after absorbing the saint essences. The birth of a supreme grade innate spiritual treasure was also the treatment of a natural-born saint. Pudu was undoubtedly a natural-born saint, and he would also become the key to the prosperity of the West. In the eyes of the heavenly Tao, the treatment of a natural-born god from the chaotic green lotus was probably second only to that of the orthodox Pangu. Even Yu Jing, who was born with the immortal Tao's providence, couldn't be compared to Pudu. Only Taoist Bujo could firmly suppress him. Of course, Yuan, who had already fallen, could also do so. Similarly, Pudu's birth exposed the West, which had long faded from everyone's sight, to the present Aparagodania state. At this moment, countless people looked at Aparagodania state. Their eyes flickered constantly, and no one knew what they were thinking. In the North Continent, in front of Eastern Emperor Tai, 9 small suns gradually merged into one, forming a huge sun. Then, the sun began to shrink, and a 3-legged golden crow was born from it. This was the first golden crow of the Three Realms era. Its name was Zhuyang, and it was also a top-notch natural-born god. It was accompanied by a superior grade innate spiritual treasure, the 9-yang banner. At the same time, in the 6 paths of reincarnation, in the shaman Tao, Pangu's heart emerged, and a Khanate grand shaman named Song was born. His aptitude wasn't inferior to any top-notch natural-born god, but he didn't have a natural-born spiritual treasure. Apart from the 12 ancestral shamans, even Hou-Yi, Xing-Tian, and the others didn't have a natural-born spiritual treasure. They didn't need one either. Their bodies were their most powerful weapons. The surface was lively, but the underground wasn't peaceful either. In the Nether Realm, in front of the Fengdu Ghost Emperor, the Khanate godly fetus that he valued so much finally split open, and a top-notch natural-born god named Tong Yu was born. Tong Yu was born with the imperial seal. At the moment of his birth, 9 streams of Khanate ghost chi took the shape of a dragon and circled behind him. This was a Khanate ghost emperor who would lead the ghost Tao to prosperity. The divine seal he carried was called Tong Yu Seal, and it was also a rare superior grade natural-born spiritual treasure. Both the Nether Realm and the human realm had natural-born gods, but strangely, no natural-born life forms were born in the celestial realm, which was the center of power in the 3 realms. Where did the origin that surged to the celestial realm go? Answer: it was used to repair the celestial realm. Don't forget that, although the celestial realm had 36 layers, it was still in a broken state. The battle between the ancient liches and demons had caused too much damage to the celestial realm, and the damage had yet to be repaired. When the origin of the chaos demon god surged, the leaders of the celestial realm had a discussion. They felt that it was enough for the 3 realms to have the human realm and the nether realm to nurture lifeforms. There was no need for them to meddle in the celestial realm. Therefore, they unanimously decided to use the origin of the chaos demon god to repair the celestial realm, and there was no need to create any lifeforms. Did the celestial realm need lifeforms? No need. The celestial realm's special status meant that it would never lack lifeforms. In any case, some lifeforms would ascend to the celestial realm in the future. The scene returned to the central divine province. Under the world tree, one of the 9 human geniuses, had successfully defied the Khanate and cultivated the body of a natural-born god. And at the critical moment of his transformation, the World Tree sensed it and gave him a World Tree seed. Because of the World Tree seed, the human genius had received an unimaginable transformation. After his transformation, he was also a top-notch natural-born god. And in his divine sea, an innate divine fetus was constantly spitting out energy. It was nurturing his lifelong spiritual treasure. As for its specific grade, it would depend on how the human genius nurtured it. This divine fetus was formed from the World Tree seed. It was extremely malleable and had the potential to become a supreme-grade Khanate spiritual treasure. In other words, as long as the human genius nurtured it well, he might be able to obtain a supreme-grade Khanate spiritual treasure in the future. The human genius was called Hao, and he was from the ancient Yoyu clan of the human race. Hao had successfully defied the Khanate and become a top-notch natural-born god. This was a joyous occasion for the human race, and it should be celebrated. He might even be received by Feng Zichen. But at this moment, Feng Zichen clearly didn't have the time to care about him. Something important was happening that would affect the future of the human race. Fuxi had reached a critical moment in his ascension. His origin Dao fruit was about to be perfected. Rumble. The imperial court of human Dao blossomed with dazzling light. Countless runes emerged and transformed into 10 Khanate Dao diagrams that rose into the air. They folded together and formed a grand Dao diagram that slowly unfurled. The Chaos Formation. Feng Zichen activated the Chaos Formation not to meet the enemy, but to absorb chaos chi from the outer chaos so that he could convert it into the purest Khanate essence for Fuxi to absorb and perfect his origin Dao fruit. As the chaos array activated, an inexplicable force ignored the existence of time and space and absorbed endless chaos energy from the outer realm. Then it was transformed by the chaos array into innate source energy that surged toward Fuxi. On the other side, Her Majesty Nuwa activated the cauldron of heaven and earth with all her might. It transformed into a vast Chenquan realm that constantly absorbed chaos chi from the outer chaos and converted it into Chenquan essence for Fuxi to absorb. With the help of the 2 great experts, in less than 10,000 years, Fuxi had accumulated enough origin energy to completely condense the illusory primordial Dao fruit and polish it to perfection. Rumble. A mysterious force spread out, causing the world to tremble and the laws to wail in submission. Chapter 831. Buzz Buzz Buzz. 8 types of Khanate essence chi appeared between heaven and earth. Heaven, earth, wind, thunder, earth, fire, mountain, and lake. They intertwined with each other and gradually formed a huge Khanate 8 trigrams suspended in the sky. Everyone could see it clearly when they looked up. Heaven and earth were fixed, mountain and lake were connected, thunder and wind were weak, and water and fire were incompatible. The 8 trigrams were wrong. Those who counted would go smoothly, and those who knew would go against it. The 8 trigrams appeared between heaven and earth. Such a phenomenon meant that Fuxi had perfected his origin Dao fruit and truly achieved Dao. For a moment, all the powerful cultivators had envious gazes. The 3 pure ones, 2 saints of the West, and the others frowned silently. The human race had become stronger again. It would be more and more difficult to deal with them. After Fuxi attained the Dao, he first greeted everyone and thanked them for their protection. Then he said loudly, "I'm sorry." Then he said loudly, "Poor Wei Fuxi has achieved Dao. In order to thank heaven and earth, I will preach Dao in the Emperor City of the Central God Province in 20,000 years. Those who are fated can come and listen." His voice was so loud that it resounded through the entire primitive world. Everyone in the 3 realms heard it. Fuxi preaching Dao was a matter of course. At that time, the primitive world would transform and the 3 realms would be reborn. Countless Khanate life forms would be born. These people had incomplete inheritances and needed someone to show them the way forward. Luais and Fuxi had achieved Dao at this time. They should preach Dao to all living beings and open the door for them. In fact, it was not only them. The other saints and origin Dao masters also needed to preach Dao. This was the heavenly mandate and also the heavenly Dao's return gift to everyone. Preaching Tao, regardless of whether it was good or bad, would bring merit. At this time, Feng Zichen noticed that while Fuxi was speaking, endless runes were flowing behind him. They turned into a great Tao torrent about 3,000 miles long that spanned between heaven and earth. The great Tao was about 3,000 miles long. This was the performance of the third sky of origin Tao. At the same time, it also meant that Fuxi had the cultivation of the third sky of origin Tao. This was interesting. Reaching the third firmament of primordial chaos as soon as he attained the Tao was a treatment only saints had. A saint's attainment of the Tao was supported by the power of the heavenly Tao. Therefore, as soon as he attained the Tao, he would have the cultivation of the third heaven of chaotic essence. However, ordinary people did not receive such treatment when they attained the Tao. Therefore, when they attained the Tao, they should start from the lowest first heaven of primordial chaos. Thus, the problem arose. Throughout the history of the primordial world, Dalio Jingxian had broken through to the primordial chaos. People like Donghuang Tai, Di Jun, and Di Jiang were far away. People like Feng Zichen, Great Emperor Ziwei, and Fuxi were close. None of them were at the first firmament of primordial chaos after their breakthroughs. Most of them were at the third firmament of primordial chaos. Thinking of this, Feng Zichen suddenly had a bold guess. In fact, breaking through to become a primordial chaos Dalio Jingxian wasn't as difficult as one would imagine. However, the heavenly Tao had set some restrictions on this, which made it extremely difficult to break through to the primordial chaos Dalio Jingxian. It was also because of this that the great divine abilities of the primordial world were suppressed a little by the heavenly Tao. Therefore, after breaking through to the primordial chaos Dalio Jingxian realm, they were able to advance several levels. This was the so-called good preparation. Of course, this was only Feng Zichen's guess. The truth might not be so. He still had to find an opportunity to verify the specific truth. I still have to thank you for attaining the Tao, fellow Taoist. Fuxi came to Feng Zichen's side and bowed respectfully. Feng Zichen accepted this calmly. With Fuxi's aptitude, attaining the Tao was inevitable. However, it shouldn't have happened now or so quickly. The reason why Fuxi could attain the Tao so quickly was that when the heavenly Tao descended in the chaos outside the sky, Feng Zichen had informed him in time to come and watch. It was precisely because he had taken a look at the body of the heavenly Tao that Fuxi saw through the confusion in his heart and cultivated to the primordial chaos Dalio Jingxian realm. From this point on, Feng Zichen could be considered to have helped Fuxi attain the Tao. It was only right for him to accept his bow. Fellow Taoist, are you going to preach the Tao in the human emperor city? Have you found a suitable place? If not, I'll lend you the sky-gazing peak. Looking at Fuxi, Feng Zichen asked curiously. It was true that the human emperor city was very big. There was even a primordial chaos demon god suppressed in it. It could be said to be the top holy land in the primordial world. However, as the imperial city of the human clan, the human emperor city was naturally full of humans. If too many living beings came to preach the Tao here, it would probably be crowded even with the size of the human emperor city. Even if it wasn't crowded, there would still be many inconveniences. Therefore, Feng Zichen suggested that Fuxi change the location, which was the sky-gazing peak not far from the human emperor city. Hearing Feng Zichen's words, Fuxi also felt that it was inappropriate. However, he had no choice. The reason why he chose to preach the Tao in the human emperor city was very simple. It was because he didn't have a Tao field in the lower realm. Didn't it sound very funny? The dignified primordial emperor Fuxi actually didn't have a Tao field. However, this was true. Not only him, but the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors also didn't have a Tao field in the human realm. In other words, the territory of the human clan was their Tao field. As long as there were humans, it was their training ground. Since there was no Tao field, Fuxi chose to preach the Tao at the human emperor city based on the principle of proximity. The sky-gazing peak is indeed not bad. However, that's your Tao field. If you lend it to the poor way, what will happen when it's your turn to preach the Tao? Fuxi was tempted by Feng Zichen's suggestion, but he also had his concerns. The sky-gazing peak was Feng Zichen's Tao field. It wasn't easy for him to use it. What was the sky-gazing peak? It was the Ziwei Mountain in Zichen's grotto heaven in the past. It was also Mount Buzhou in the mini-desolate realm. When the mini-desolate realm fused with the desolate land fragment, this mountain also fused with the desolate land. It also gained a lot of fortune and became the ancestral bloodline of the central divine prefecture. In other words, this mountain was the number one divine mountain in the central divine prefecture. In the mini-desolate realm, it wasn't a problem to call this mountain Mount Buzhou. However, in the desolate land, it was a little inappropriate to call it this name. Therefore, Feng Zichen thought about it and renamed it Sky-Gazing Peak. It was derived from the fact that one could see the sky by raising their heads. The Sky-Gazing Peak, the number one mountain in the central divine prefecture, was extraordinary. Hey, fellow Taoist Fuxi, you don't have to worry. If I preach, there are many places to choose. You can preach on the Gauchan planet, in the Imperial Court of Human Tao, and under the World Tree. Knowing Fuxi's concerns, Feng Zichen said casually, I, Feng Zichen, have countless properties in the desolate land. I'm not afraid of not finding a place to preach. Then we'll do as you say. Since Feng Zichen said so, Fuxi didn't hesitate and agreed directly. As for changing the location of the preaching from the Emperor City to the Sky-Gazing Peak, it seemed like a child's play, but it wasn't a big problem. How could the location of the preaching be changed? Of course not. However, the Emperor City was built at the foot of the Sky-Gazing Peak. It wasn't a problem to say that the two were the same place. After bidding farewell to Feng Zichen and chatting with Nuo for a while, Fuxi left and went to the Sky-Gazing Peak. Although there was still some time before the preaching, he still had to make some arrangements in advance. For example, he set up obstacles for the preaching to eliminate some of the people who were lacking in morals. With Fuxi's attainment of the Tao, the laws between heaven and earth became more active, and the spiritual qi in the heavens and earth became richer than before. For a time, the birth rate of connate lifeforms, which originally needed a long time to be born, increased by more than 100 times. In just 100 years, a large number of connate lifeforms were born in the three realms. Just like that, another 2,000 years passed. In these 2,000 years, nothing major happened in the three realms. Now that heaven and earth had just been promoted, the laws were abnormally active. It was the best time to cultivate, and it was easier to get close to the connate Tao. Everyone was busy cultivating, so how could they have time to come out and cause trouble? Because of this, the three realms had been unusually calm recently, and it looked like a peaceful world. The 8,000 years of the three realms Yuan calendar. It was less than 2,000 years since the heavenly tribulation saint, the great emperor of the South Pole, preached the Tao in the divine firmament palace. Therefore, the life forms that were farther away from the divine firmament 9 heavens had already begun their journey. The three realms was very big. Although it was not as big as the primeval age, it was definitely bigger than the primeval age. Even the Daluo Taoist priests would have to fly around the three realms for at least 8,000 years if he wanted to fly around by himself without using his spatial divine ability. Under such circumstances, the distance between the mortal realm and the heavenly realm would not be small. It was estimated that even a golden immortal cultivator might not be able to reach the heavenly realm from the mortal realm if he flew at full speed for 1,000 years. And this was only the distance between the heavenly realm and the mortal realm. One had to know that the world tree was constantly growing. As it grew, the distance between the heavenly realm and the mortal realm would definitely increase, until the lifeforms below the Taijingxian would not be able to reach the heavenly realm. This was a digression. It would take many tens of thousands of years for this to happen. The life forms that went from the mortal realm to the divine firmament 9 heavens to listen to the Tao were of all realms. There were Taijingxian, golden immortals, mystic immortals, and even celestial immortals. However, although many people went, there were only a few who were truly qualified to enter the divine firmament palace. When Tao ancestor Hongjun preached in the divine firmament palace, there were only 3,000 people who were fated to attend. Therefore, the number of people who were fated to attend Lei Zhe's Tao preaching would not exceed this number. 3,000 was the limit. Lei Zhe had set up 3 obstacles at the border between the heavenly realm and the mortal realm. Only the Taijingxian and the best among the golden immortals could pass through them. Those ordinary golden immortals and lifeforms below the golden immortal realm could not even enter the heavenly realm, let alone the divine firmament palace. This Tao preaching was destined to have nothing to do with them from the beginning. However, there was no need to worry. Even if they could not reach the heavenly realm, they would not encounter any danger. After all, they came to listen to the Tao. Lei Zhe would not let them die halfway through because of an accident. There was no need to pay special attention to these lifeforms. Lei Zhe only needed to give an order. Before and after his Tao preaching, killing was prohibited in the three realms. Then, no one in the three realms would dare to kill or provoke the Saint Lei Zhe, because he was not only a saint, but also a saint who controlled the heavenly tribulations. Everyone knew that saints were terrifying. However, they had not seen them with their own eyes, so they did not have a concrete understanding of them. However, the heavenly tribulations were different. The fear of them was rooted in the depths of their souls. Therefore, no one dared to disobey Lei Zhe's order. In the eyes of the people, Lei Zhe was the most terrifying saint. At the same time, he was also the most hated saint in the three realms. The three calamities, 9 tribulations, and 12 tribulations had cut off countless immortal paths. Who would not hate Lei Zhe? Unfortunately, it was useless. Not only would their hatred of Lei Zhe not affect him, it would even become one of his sources of power, making him even stronger. In the blink of an eye, more than 1,000 years had passed. The three realms had officially entered the 9,500th year of the three realms Yuan calendar. The time of Lei Zhe's Tao preaching was set to be the 10,000th year of the three realms Yuan calendar. In other words, it was less than 500 years before Lei Zhe's Tao preaching. At this time, many people had arrived outside the divine firmament palace. There were about 1,000 of them. More than 99% of them were Tai Tao lords. Only a dozen or so of them were golden immortals. There were basically no new living beings in the Tai Jinxian. However, among the few golden immortals, more than half were connate lifeforms born in the three realms. Come to think of it, this was normal. The three realms era had only begun for less than 10,000 years. In such a short time, the newborns could cultivate to the golden immortal realm. Their potential was already top-notch. As for Tai Tao lords, apart from those who were born with the cultivation of Tai Tao lords, most of them were Tao lords. As for the rest, even the top-notch connate godfiends were probably only at the perfected golden immortal realm. They were still a bit away from becoming Tao lords of Tai. As for the newborns, the heavenly Tao had told them about Lei Zhe's Tao preaching. Not long after they were born, Lei Zhe's voice naturally reverberated in their ears. These living beings were limited by the heavenly Tao's inheritance. Although they didn't know exactly how strong Lei Zhe was, they could tell that he was far stronger than them. Therefore, when they heard about Lei Zhe's preaching, they were tempted and came here after a lot of effort. First, they had to pass through the astral winds, then the lightning and fire. Then, they had to withstand the impact of the meteors. They thought that was the end, but they didn't expect there to be a lightning field beyond the 9th firmament. Although this lightning field only targeted those with heavy karma, who wouldn't feel their scalp tingle when the heavenly tribulation lightning gathered densely together. In order to listen to Lei Zhe's Tao preaching, these living beings outside the divine firmament palace had suffered greatly. However, their experience was nothing compared to the 3,000 guests of the purple firmament palace back then. In order to listen to the Daolord's Tao preaching, they had risked their lives. What Luai's left behind was nothing compared to the chaos beyond the heavens. Outside the divine firmament palace, the 9 heavenly lords of the 9th firmament stood in a row in front of the main entrance. Although they didn't say anything, they stared coldly at the crowd. A faint Tao might spread from their bodies, bringing great pressure to the people who came to listen to the preaching. The atmosphere suddenly became oppressive. Chapter 8:32. The 9 divine lords of the 9 heavens did this for no other reason than to scare the crowd. Once there were too many people, it was easy to cause trouble. The 9 divine lords of the 9 heavens were very lazy and didn't want to waste their time. Therefore, he pretended to be unapproachable in order to scare the crowd and make them behave themselves. The effect was indeed good. Seeing the 9 divine lords of the 9 heavens' expression, The crowd didn't dare to move at all for fear of angering them. They just stayed outside the divine firmament palace and waited quietly. They weren't just afraid. The 9 divine lords of the 9 heavens didn't hide their cultivation at all. The magnificent aura that belonged only to the Daluo Taoist priests spread out from their bodies and pressed down on the crowd's hearts like a huge rock, bringing them great pressure. Facing the 9 divine lords of the 9 heavens, the crowd felt as if they were facing the great Tao directly, as if they were the incarnation of the great Tao. Thinking of this, even the ignorant crowd knew that the 9 people in front of them were probably the legendary Daluo Taoist priests. Thinking of this, the crowd felt even more respect for the 9 divine lords of the 9 heavens. They didn't even dare to show a trace of dissatisfaction. The Daluo Taoist priests were standing outside the door. They were a group of Tai Dao lords. What was there to complain about? The crowd waited for another 400 years. It was less than 100 years before Leisha, the heavenly tribulation saint, would teach the great Tao. At this time, there were more than 2,000 cultivators gathered outside the divine firmament palace. Most of them were ancient creatures, and the newborn creatures barely made up 10%. 10,000 years was still a short time. Not many creatures could be born. Even if many creatures were born, it would be difficult for them to cultivate to the golden immortal or Tai Jinxian realm in such a short time. However, this wasn't all bad. At least the newborn creatures who could come to the divine firmament palace at this time all proved their excellence. They were born less than 10,000 years ago, but they already had the cultivation of top golden immortal or Tai Jinxian realm. If they were innate godfiends, it would be fine. But if they were innate creatures, their aptitude could be said to be quite extraordinary. Even now, the gates of divine firmament's palace still showed no signs of opening. It was unknown what they were waiting for. Although the crowd was puzzled, they didn't dare to ask. They just waited silently. In his heart, he thought, perhaps the divine firmament palace's doors will only open when the time is right. Just as everyone was thinking about this, the 9 brothers of the 9 firmament monarchs suddenly moved. They turned around and opened the door. After opening the door, Zhu Qianjun didn't let them in. He just stood outside the door respectfully with a faint smile on his face. No one knew what he was doing. Although everyone was puzzled, no one was tactful enough to ask. Their knowledge was limited, but that didn't mean they were stupid. Looking at the 9th Heaven Lord's expression, they could roughly guess what was going on. The 9th firmament master of the 9 clouds opened the gate and waited outside respectfully. As for who that great figure was and how powerful he was, the old creatures all knew. There was an 80% chance that a saint came. However, the new life form knew nothing about it. But it didn't matter if they didn't know. They could guess. The 9th firmament master of the 9 clouds had the same cultivation as the Daluo Taoist priests. He was already an unreachable figure in their eyes. Someone who even such a figure had to be respectful to was undoubtedly more terrifying than the Taoist priests. It was an existence beyond their knowledge. Just like the saints, these new life form didn't know what kind of realm they were in. In the inheritance they received, there was no such realm at all. They just instinctively thought that the saints should be a very powerful title. As for how powerful they were, they didn't know. But now they knew that the saints were definitely more powerful than the Daluo Taoist priests. Because the saint they were about to meet actually made the 9 Daluo Taoist priests welcome him outside. If they weren't more powerful than the Taoist priests, would they dare to do so? They guessed right. The 9th firmament master of the 9 clouds changed his attitude because the great figures were about to arrive. Now, the 9 of them represented the face of the Luai's Lock. If they were to greet the other powerful beings with a straight face, the Luai's Lock would definitely teach them a lesson. This time, they were there to make the Luai's Lock proud, not to embarrass the Luai's Lock. If they really messed it up, the 9th firmament master of the 9 clouds didn't dare to be careless when he thought of the Luai's Lock. He took out the etiquette he had practiced for many years and got ready to welcome the great figures from the Eldritch Land. The saints were the rulers of the world, so they were naturally the last to arrive. Therefore, the great figures from the Eldritch Land were the first to arrive. The Luai's Lock becoming a saint was a big event in the Eldritch Land. As long as they didn't hate the Luai's Lock, They would come to watch the ceremony and congratulate the Luai's Lock becoming a saint. There were many great figures in the Eldritch Land. The ninth firmament master of the nine clouds was an otaku who didn't go out all year round, so he didn't know most of them. Well, in fact, even the Luai's Lock didn't know all the great figures from the Eldritch Land, let alone them. After all, some of the great figures were really otaku, even more otaku than the ninth firmament master of the nine clouds. Some of them even stayed in seclusion for an eternity. They really didn't show up unless something big happened in the world. Some of the great figures didn't even want to show up when the world was destroyed. Those great figures were like that. Except for their peers, the powerful figures who were born later had never heard of their names, let alone know them. They couldn't even greet them when they met. Therefore, when the first group of great figures arrived at the Shinshao Palace, the ninth firmament master of the nine clouds raised his head. Good heavens, the nine brothers didn't know any of them. However, it didn't matter if they didn't know their names, because it wasn't a problem for the ninth firmament master of the nine clouds. As long as they didn't know the great figures, they all called them seniors and invited them into the Shinshao Palace respectfully so that their masters could chat with them. It's not that the author can't think of names, it's just that there are too many people. As for whether their masters knew them or not, it had nothing to do with the ninth firmament master of the nine clouds. They were only responsible for welcoming the guests and didn't care about anything else. When the great figures arrived and saw the 9 Daluo Taoist priests standing in a row outside the door, they couldn't help but feel shocked. They felt that this new saint had hidden his strength too well. He had secretly taught 9 disciples at the level of Taoist priests. This was enough to make the Luai's Lock one of the top 3 on the Eldritch Land's master-teacher ranking. The ninth firmament master of the nine clouds didn't know the great figures, so the people who came to listen to the sermon naturally didn't know them either. However, they had their own methods. When they saw the auras of the newcomers, which were as deep as the sea and as vast as the great Tao, they did not hesitate to call them Tao Lords. Those above the Daluo Holy Man, and even those below the saints were all Holy Lords. There was nothing wrong with calling them that. After a few groups of people came and went, finally a few people that the ninth firmament master of the nine clouds knew came. The ninth firmament master of the nine clouds had heard of great figures like Zhen Yuanzi, the Queen Mother of the West, Patriarch Nether River, and Patriarch Kuanping, who often appeared in the Untainted Land. Not only the ninth firmament master of the nine clouds, but also many of the creatures who came to listen to the sermon had heard of their legends. Seeing Zhen Yuanzi, the Queen Mother of the West, and the others come, the ninth firmament master of the nine clouds finally changed the way he addressed them. He called them great immortals, supreme gods, Taoist mothers, or demon masters. In short, they were all well-mannered. After a few more years, most of the great adepts had arrived, and it was finally time for the finale contestants to take the stage. The first one to come was the Heavenly Emperor, who was the closest to this place. He and the Jade Lake Heavenly Empress were riding a 7-colored auspicious cloud from the Heavenly Court. After the two of them arrived, before the ninth firmament master of the nine clouds could speak, the people who came to listen to the sermon took the lead and bowed. Greetings, Your Majesty and the Empress. We wish Your Majesty and the Empress a holy and boundless life. The old creatures all bowed. Although the new creatures did not know who they were, they also bowed. The people could not recognize the great figures, but they could not recognize the Celestial Emperor and the Empress. Even if they did not recognize them, it did not matter. They were all Tao Lords, and they still had the means to look at aura. The boundless Emperor aura that symbolized the Celestial Emperor and the Empress above Jade Lake's head could be recognized as long as one was not blind. Seeing such a phenomenon, one naturally knew that the Celestial Emperor had come without the need for others to tell them. Everyone, please rise. Walking down from the Imperial Chariot with Jade Lake, Heavenly Emperor Hao Tian asked everyone to rise in a very friendly manner. As Heavenly Emperor Hao Tian's realm became closer to that of primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian, his aura became more and more transcendent over the years. His majesty gradually faded, and he had a feeling that everything was not entangled in his heart. Thank you, Your Majesty. Hearing this, everyone stood up. At this moment, 8 more people came down from the Imperial Chariot. They were Yaoji and the 7 fairies. Good Lord, Hao Yin even brought his family with him this time. Greetings, Your Majesty. Greetings, Your Majesty. Greetings, Princess Royal and the 7 princesses. 9 Heavens Lord stepped forward and respectfully bowed to Heavenly Emperor Hao Tian and Jade Lake. Then, he nodded slightly as a greeting to the 7 fairies of Yaoji. Heavenly Emperor Hao Tian and Jade Lake's cultivation was high, and her identity was honorable enough. Therefore, she accepted the greetings of the 9 brothers calmly. However, the 7 fairies of Yaoji slightly tilted their bodies, not daring to accept the greetings of the 9 brothers. The daughter of the Celestial Emperor was not as precious as the Taoist priests. Heavenly Emperor Hao Tian looked up and down at 9 Heavens Lord and said with a sigh, "Are you the disciples of Taoist Chongsheng? You are really extraordinary. All 9 of you are Taoist priests, immortal and indestructible. What a great fortune. Taoist Chongsheng has really hidden himself well. 9 Taoist priests was nothing special. However, 9 Taoist priests of the same origin was a little scary. The origin was the same, which meant that if the 9 of them joined forces, there would be no hindrance. It was not as simple as 1 + 1. Just like in the ancient times, although the 12 ancestors of sorcerers were strong, they were not invincible individually. There were people who were on par with them or even stronger. However, when the 12 ancestors of sorcerers joined forces, they were really invincible. Even Taoist ancestor Hongjun would frown. The 9 brothers looked like the Daluo Taoist priests. However, if they joined forces with the corresponding array, they could probably fight with the great medium. That was why Heavenly Emperor Hao Tian said that Luais had hidden himself well. He had such disciples, but he still hid them and did not show them to the public. If he had not achieved Taoism and used them as a front, the public would not have known about it. Haha, Taoist brother Hao Tian, you must be joking. They are just 9 good-for-nothing disciples. They don't deserve your praise. Luais walked out of the Purple Cloud Palace and shouted at Heavenly Emperor Hao Tian from afar. Hearing that, Heavenly Emperor Hao Tian and Yao Qi were speechless. If such disciples were not good enough, what kind of disciples were good enough? Did they have to be the top great medium? Looking at Lei Zhe's expression, although he said that he was a good-for-nothing, he could not hide the smug look on his face. This made Hao Tian and Yao Qi speechless. He was showing off his disciples, right? Okay. Please come in, Taoist friends. Luais did not care about their expressions and went forward to invite them into the Divine Cloud Palace. With Heavenly Emperor Hao Tian and Yao Qi's status, if Luais did not come out to welcome them, it would be impolite. Therefore, he walked out of the Divine Cloud Palace to welcome them. However, Heavenly Emperor Hao Tian rejected Luais' good intentions and said, "Taoist Ziwei and Taoist Gaochen are not here yet. Poor Wei will wait for them here and go in with them." Hearing that, Luais did not insist. He just stood with him and waited together. The ones who were coming next were all saints, and Luais had to welcome them personally. He did not plan to run around, so he just waited here. After Heavenly Emperor Hao Tian, Saint Taiching came leisurely on the green ox. The green ox was formed by a wisp of connate clear qi. It was a primitive mutant. Saint Taiching liked it very much and took it as his mount. Following the Grand Pure One, the green ox could be considered to have obtained quite a lot of benefits and cultivated to the Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal Realm. Yes, it was Daluo Jinxian, not Daluo Taoist priests. If it was really Daluo Taoist priests, he would not be a mount, not even a saint. How could the incarnation of the Great Tao be a slave? This was blasphemy against the Great Tao, and the blasphemer was destined to not have a good ending. Saints could force Daluo Taoist priests to do things for them, but they could not force Daluo Taoist priests to be slaves. That was it. Seeing Saint Taiching coming, Luais hurried to welcome him with Thunder Lord of 9 Heavens. The 7 fairies and Yaoji also followed behind them. Heavenly Emperor Hao Tian and Heavenly Emperor Hao Tian did not move. Heavenly Emperor Hao Tian and Empress Hao Tian were the Heavenly Emperor and Empress. They were more powerful than the saints in name. Only the saints would welcome them. How could they welcome the saints? If the saints were not satisfied, they could take the case to the Heavenly Tao. Even the saints could not win. Greetings, Taoist brother Tai Ching. After greeting the Tai Ching saint, Lui's glanced at the 9 sky monarchs and said, "You guys, come and greet the Tai Ching saint." "Greetings, Saint Tai Ching." The 9 brothers were helpless. For the sake of their master, they had to pretend to be obedient children and bowed to Saint Tai Ching. At this moment, Lui's pretended to be helpless and said, "These are all inferior disciples. They are not good enough. Brother, please excuse us." Chapter 833. The Grand Pure One was originally very happy, but after hearing Lei Zhe's words, he could not help but freeze for a moment. Then, he smiled bitterly and said, "Ha, fellow Taoist Chongqing, you really know how to joke. The 9 disciples of a sect are all Taoist priests. If such a disciple is still a joke, how many disciples in the 3 realms can be taken out?" The effect of Lei Zhe showing off his disciples in front of the Grand Pure One was not as good as he had imagined. After all, the Grand Pure One's methods of teaching his disciples were not bad. He had Xuandu under him to support him. However, Lei Zhe did not care too much. He was not showing off his disciples to attack others. He was showing off and making himself proud. A sect with 9 Tao lords. This was the first among the sages to do so. Bringing it out to show off was a great boost to Lui's reputation. Saints were immortal. Apart from making breakthroughs and obtaining primordial supreme treasures, only some glorious things could make them happy. What a boring life. Really, I'm not envious. Saint, please enter. Lei Zhe cupped his hands at the Grand Pure One and wanted to invite him into the hall. However, the Grand Pure One refused with a smile. He wanted to wait outside with Lei Zhe for the other fellow Taoists. Not long after, the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning arrived. As the person who paid the most attention to ostentation in the primordial world, the appearance of the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning was quite extraordinary. How extraordinary was it? There was a poem as proof. The auspicious cloud above him was 30,000 feet tall, and he was covered in colorful clouds. A strange beast flew over as an armrest, holding the 3 treasure jade rui. The white crane led the way in front, followed by the red phoenix dancing immortal robe. The feather fans separated the clouds and mist, and the immortal child played the jade flute. The yellow-scarved strongman listened to the imperial order, and smoke billowed. The immortals followed. The auspicious cloud above his head was covered in endless immortal light. In front, there were white cranes and green phoenixes opening the way. Behind, there were red phoenixes dancing. There were immortal children on his left and right, and there were 9 dragons pulling the carriage under his feet. Good fellow, even the Tao ancestors' trip was not as grand as the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginnings. The 9 dragons' Agarwood carriage stopped, and the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning walked out. An immortal crane flew over and landed under the Heavenly Lord's feet, turning into steps for him to walk down the carriage. Greetings, Saint of Primordial Beginning. When the audience saw the primordial Lord of Heaven rushing over, they hurriedly bowed. The newborn creature was confused and did not know who the visitor was. However, seeing the grandeur of the visitor, he knew that the visitor was a top-notch big shot. Hence, he followed the old creature and bowed. Greetings, Yuancher Saint. The new creatures were all stupefied. Didn't the inheritance say that the Taoist priests were the most powerful in this world? But were these people, whose auras were as terrifying as the great Tao, really Taoist priests? In that instant, the new creatures all knew that their understanding of this world was still too little. Forget about knowing many great figures, they hadn't even heard of them before. Thus, all of them decided in their hearts that they would definitely properly understand the history of the 3 dimensions once they returned. The 3 realms had just been reborn, so where did so many powerful figures come from? Could it be that there were even more ancient and unknown eras before the 3 realms? Their way of thinking was very good. Unfortunately, they who were born in the 3 dimensions were bound to be unable to understand the primeval times. Following the rebirth of the 3 realms, the primordial world had already become a thing of the past. That period of time had been sealed by the combined efforts of everyone. They had no choice, as there were too many dark histories. None of them wanted to ruin their heroic image, so they decided to work together to seal the primeval times history. There were some people and some things that they only needed to know and protect themselves. There was no need for more people to understand. The people of the three realms only needed to know about the three realms. The primeval times were not something they could know. If they really wanted to understand, there were many legends about the primeval times. Whether they were true or not, they could slowly guess. Greetings, Yuanshi Saint, Master, Taiching Saint, Jade Emperor, and Queen Mother are waiting for you outside the Divine Firmament Palace. Without waiting for Lei Zhe's instructions, the 9 heavenly lords had already walked over and greeted the Yuanshi Saint from afar. Master, you are the longevity Taoist's disciples? Asked the Yuanshi Saint uncertainly as he looked at the 9 Taoist priests of the same origin. The leader of the 9 heavenly lords, the Divine Firmament Heavenly Lord, nodded and replied, Saint, my master is the southern extremity longevity the arch. Hiss! Hearing that, the Yuanshi Heavenly Lord's face did not change at all, but he gasped in his heart. To think that the southern extremity longevity emperor would be able to nurture 9 Tao sovereign disciples without making any noise at all. This was truly a well-hidden secret. Brother Yuanshi, it's been a while. Just then, Lei Zhe walked out and shouted at the Yuanshi Heavenly Lord from afar. As he spoke, Lei Zhe suddenly sped up and arrived in front of the Yuanshi Heavenly Lord in a few steps. Brother Yuanshi, these are the 9 useless disciples of the poor way. What do you think of them? Are they good enough for you? Lei Zhe and the Yuanshi Heavenly Lord were not on good terms. That was because the Yuanshi Heavenly Lord's throne was snatched from the southern extremity immortal elder, the primeval Heavenly Lord's disciple. Because of that, the two of them were not on good terms. With that in mind, Lei Zhe did not mind angering the Yuanshi Heavenly Lord if he had the chance. And right now, there was an opportunity. If the Yuanshi Heavenly Lord had any regrets in his life, it would definitely be his disciples. Counting the 12 direct disciples under him, none of them were successful. Not to mention others, they could not even compare to the disciples of the tribe of Jie that he looked down on. It was a sad thing. Therefore, Lei Zhe's use of his disciples to provoke the Yuanshi Heavenly Lord was really effective. As soon as Lei Zhe finished speaking, the Yuanshi Heavenly Lord's expression changed. After a long while, he squeezed out a "not bad" from between his teeth. Not bad at all. If he could, the Heavenly Lord of the Origin really wanted to say that the disciples of the Lui's Lock were trash. However, looking at the cultivation of the Master of the 9 Clouds and the 9th Heaven Tao Master, he could not bring himself to say that. Today's situation was special. Lei Zhe could not go too far. After provoking the Yuanshi Heavenly Lord a little, he stopped provoking him and invited him to enter the Divine Cloud Palace. Looking at Lei Zhe's expression, those who did not know would think that the two of them were close. Lei Zhe's invitation was very sincere, but the Yuanshi Heavenly Lord still refused. The reason was the same as the previous few. He wanted to wait for the others to come and go together. Lei Zhe did not force him. He stood outside the door and waited with him. At this moment, the 9 dragons' Agarwood chariot that the Yuanshi Heavenly Lord stopped outside the door suddenly lit up with a divine light. Then, the 9 dragons that pulled the chariot began to change. Gradually, they turned into 9 gods in golden armor. They formed a circle to protect the Agarwood chariot. These 9 dragons were all 5-clawed golden dragons. They were all in the realm of Daluo Jingxian. Daluo Taoist priests would not become someone's mount, let alone pull a chariot. According to this, Daluo Jingxian was the strongest mount that could be possessed. 9 5-clawed divine dragons at the level of Daluo Jingxian pulling the chariot. The Yuanshi Heavenly Lord was really generous. Seeing this, everyone looked at the 9 dragons' Agarwood chariot. Some of them even looked at it with envy. Well, those powerful mediums who entered the Divine Cloud Palace first all came out at this moment. Since the sages were waiting outside, they naturally could not sit inside. So they came out to wait together. Then, as soon as these powerful mediums came out, they saw the 9 dragons' Agarwood chariot of the Yuanshi Heavenly Lord. It was really luxurious. To be honest, everyone was envious of the Yuanshi Heavenly Lord's chariot. They were all prideful people. How majestic it would be to go out in such a luxurious chariot. Who would not want it? However, even if he wanted to, he couldn't do it. It was not difficult to find 9 Daluojixian to pull the chariot. But it was not difficult to find 9 5-clawed golden dragons to pull the chariot. It was dangerous. 5-clawed golden dragons were the descendants of the ancestral dragon. Only the Yuanshi Heavenly Lord, as a sage, dared to let them pull the chariot. If it were anyone else, they would be killed by the ancestral dragon in minutes. The ancestral dragon was a sacred beast. Its strength was comparable to that of a sage. Although the sacred beasts of the 5 elements were suppressed in the 4-level land and could not come out unless the world was in chaos, that was a long time ago. Now, the world had changed several times and the overall appearance had changed. Who knew how binding the oath of the past was now? Perhaps the rule of not coming out unless the world was in chaos had long been invalid. The sacred beasts of the 5 elements could come and go freely in the untainted land. It was just that no one knew it. This was not a baseless guess. It was based on evidence. At the end of the ancient times, the Tao Lords and the Chaos Demon God had a great war. The untainted land was smashed into pieces, but the sacred beasts of the 5 elements did not appear. Was this not proof that they were free from the constraints of the heavenly way? With this guess in mind, everyone could not help but be afraid of the sacred beasts of the 5 elements. Naturally, they did not dare to attack the 3 Khanate clans easily. Therefore, these powerful people could only envy a chariot like the 9 Dragons' Agarwood chariot. It was impossible for them to build an identical chariot. The chariot of the Yuanshi Heavenly Lord was so dazzling that even Lei Zhe could not help but take a few more glances. Seeing this, a smile appeared on the face of the Yuanshi Heavenly Lord. As soon as he arrived at the Shenshao Palace, he was shown off by Lei Zhe's disciple. One could imagine how depressed he was. Now, with that gorgeous chariot, the Yuanshi Heavenly Lord could regain some of his dignity. Naturally, he was overjoyed. Unfortunately, the Yuanshi Heavenly Lord did not know what Lei Zhe was thinking. If he knew, he would not be able to smile. This was because Lei Zhe glanced at the 9 Dragons' Agarwood chariot not out of envy, but because he wanted to see the Yuanshi Heavenly Lord make a fool of himself later. What kind of joke? He was already here. Rumble. Inexplicably, heaven and earth shook. Khanate Daos appeared together and hung in the sky. At the same time, billions of starlight fell and turned into a dazzling river of stars that slowly spread out in the void. In addition, auspicious clouds covered the sky. Auspicious chi filled the air. The heavenly way purple chi that represented the heavenly way appeared out of nowhere and spread out in the void. It seemed to cover the sky and the sun, creating a myriad of phenomena. Khanate Daos opened the way, billions of starlight paved the way, and the heavenly way purple chi fell. Seeing this phenomenon, everyone knew that great Emperor Ziwei had arrived. Only he could bear such a phenomenon. Before great Emperor Ziwei appeared, everyone, including the sages, took the initiative to welcome him. What was ostentatious? This was it. Before the person arrived, the phenomenon had already arrived. The sages even greeted him with cupped fists. In the untainted land, other than the ancestral lord, only great Emperor Ziwei was qualified to do so. Great Emperor Ziwei was the most virtuous in the untainted land. Even the heavenly way had to coax him and did not dare to offend him. Who's here? What a grand display. It's even grander than the sages. Could it be a sage too? Some newborn creatures were puzzled and asked curiously. Beside him, an old creature could not help but glance at him after hearing his words. He reminded him, "Don't talk too much. Great Emperor Ziwei is here. You must be more respectful later. You should know that disrespecting him will damage your luck at best. At worst, you will be punished by the heavens." Seeing that this person did not seem to be joking, the newborn creature, including those around him who did not know great Emperor Ziwei, was shocked. They did not dare to say anything more. They all bowed their heads respectfully and did not say a word. How powerful was great Emperor Ziwei? Just being disrespectful to him would cause them to be punished by the heavens. This kind of treatment was unheard of. Even a sage could not do this. For a moment, everyone could not help but be curious about great Emperor Ziwei. What kind of person was he to have such great ability? To have tens of thousands of Daos open the way for him and have sages wait for him with cupped fists. While everyone was thinking, endless light suddenly rose from the end of the galaxy. It was extremely bright, like the sun. Amidst the dazzling light, an imperial chariot pulled by 9 dragons slowly appeared before everyone's eyes. 9 dragons pulling a chariot? Seeing this scene, everyone subconsciously looked at Lord of Heaven's 9 dragons' Agarwood chariot. Then, everyone realized the difference between the 2 chariots. There was an obvious difference. First of all, Lord of Heaven's 9 dragons' Agarwood chariot was only an acquired supreme treasure. But Great Emperor Ziwei's imperial chariot, if everyone was not mistaken, should be a top innate spiritual treasure. No one knew where Great Emperor Ziwei found it. Secondly, the 9 dragons pulling the chariot for Great Emperor Ziwei were much more powerful than the 9 dragons pulling the chariot for Lord of Heaven. Was the one who was stronger than Daluo Jingxian the Daluo Taoist priests? No, he was stronger than the Daluo Taoist priests. The patterns on the 9 dragons seemed to be naturally formed. They exuded the aura of the way. Endless mysteries intertwined, and the powerful force that emanated from their bodies was as vast as the Great Path. In front of the 9 dragons, many of the great divines present actually felt slightly threatened. This feeling was not wrong. Each of the 9 dragons pulling the chariot for Great Emperor Ziwei had the power of a great master. Thinking of this, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. This was truly earth-shattering. 9 great masters pulling the chariot. How heroic and domineering was that? Compared to this, Lord of Heaven's 9 dragons' Agarwood chariot, which they were envious of, was nothing. The difference was like heaven and earth. Everyone would be envious when they saw the 9 dragons' Agarwood chariot. But Great Emperor Ziwei's 9 dragons' imperial chariot could only amaze and shock everyone. Although Great Emperor Ziwei was strong, he could not make 9 Taoist priests pull his chariot for him. Moreover, they were Taoist priests of the Dragon Clan. This was something he could not do. Therefore, the ones pulling his chariot were not Daluo Taoist priests, nor were they dragons. Instead, they were innate ferocious beasts, 9 innate ferocious beasts whose strength was comparable to top great masters. Chapter 8:34. The primordial ancient dragon was the name of the 9-headed dragon that pulled the chariot for Ziwei the Great. They were formed from the blood essence of the primordial chaos ancient dragon. Although they had no spiritual intelligence, they were born with power comparable to the Daluo Taoist priests. Although these 9 dragons came from the same source, their attributes were completely different. They corresponded to the 9 attributes of yin, yang, metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, and thunder respectively. In order to capture them, Ziwei the Great spent a lot of effort. These 9 primordial ancient dragons did not live in the wilderness. Instead, they lived in 9 special innate secret realms. Fortunately, Zhou had the ability to monitor the heavens. Otherwise, Ziwei the Great would not have been able to find their whereabouts. These 9 barbaric ancient dragons had been living in their birthplace ever since they were born. They had never taken a step out of their special innate secret realms. Every day they would eat and sleep after they were full, and eat after they were well rested. They were very carefree. However, in the end, their bloodline was powerful and they did not cultivate much. Naturally, they had the power that was on par with the great divine masters. Unfortunately, they were targeted by Ziwei the Great, who should have continued to live leisurely. Their peaceful lives were disrupted because of this. Although the power comparable to a great medium was not weak, it was nothing in front of Ziwei the Great. They were easily suppressed by him. With a raise of his hand, Ziwei the Great suppressed 9 primordial ancient dragons with strength comparable to a great medium and took them as mounts to pull the chariot. Ziwei the Great did not even let go of the innate secret realm that nurtured the 9 dragons. He moved it to the boundless starry sky. Where did Ziwei the Great's supreme grade innate spiritual treasure, the imperial chariot, come from? Wasn't it refined by fusing the innate spiritual treasures nurtured by the 9 innate secret realms? 9 primordial ancient dragons pulling the chariot. That was luxurious enough, wasn't it? However, this was not the most luxurious part. Although the 9 dragons had different attributes, they came from the same source. In other words, when the 9 dragons joined forces and merged into one, they could transform into a primordial chaos ancient dragon to fight the enemy. It was truly ferocious. Everyone obviously thought of this as well. They could not help but sigh in their hearts. Ziwei the Great's generosity was truly outrageous. Greetings, fellow Taoists. After Great Emperor Ziwei arrived, he first scanned everyone's faces before returning the greeting. After greeting everyone, Great Emperor Ziwei glanced at the 9 dragons' Agarwood chariot of the Yuanshi Tianzuan with a faint smile. Although he didn't say anything, his attitude was enough to make the Yuanshi Tianzuan's face darken. To be honest, the reason why Great Emperor Ziwei used 9 dragons to pull his chariot was to imitate Lord Yuanshi. It was just that this imitation was too good, much better than the real one, and far better than the real one. After Great Emperor Ziwei arrived, he had just stepped out of the imperial chariot when thousands of spirits suddenly appeared in the distance. Another imperial chariot was slowly approaching. The saint emperors of the human race had arrived. Everyone went forward and saw the human race's Saint Emperor Feng Zichin, Her Highness Nuwa, and Heavenly Emperor Fuxi in a carriage heading towards Divine Firmament Palace. When a human emperor traveled, the atmosphere was even more extraordinary. In front of them were thousands of spirits clearing the way, and above their heads were the canopies of the 5 emperors. Behind them were the 2 sovereigns and 5 emperors of the human race, and many other great mediums. When everyone's power was combined, it created a boundless atmosphere that shook the heavens and the earth. After Feng Zichin, it was Donghuang Tai. This former number 1 master of the primitive world, even without his past glory, was still quite extraordinary. He came alone. There were no strange phenomena around him, but in the eyes of all living beings, he seemed to be the center of the world, and everything in the world revolved around him. Finally, it was the 2 saints of the West. These 2 saints knew that they were poor and couldn't compare to the people of the East. They didn't want to compete with the people of the East, so they came in a very low-key manner. Goddess Hutu rarely left the underworld. Even a big event like Luai's becoming a saint wasn't enough to alarm her. However, she was still one of the 4 Imperials. For this reason, although Goddess Hutu didn't come in person, she still sent her incarnation, the Hutu Emperor, to come and congratulate him. In this way, all the saints and many primordial chaos experts were considered to have arrived. Luais didn't hesitate anymore. He led everyone into the Divine Firmament Palace and arranged their seats. Then, he asked the 9th Heaven Lord to call in the people who came to listen to the sermon. And this day happened to be the 10,000th year of the primitive world. It was also the day of Luai's sermon. Everyone came in. There were exactly 3,000 people, no more, no less. 90% of them were creatures of the primitive world, and 10% were creatures of the 3 realms. Luais wasn't surprised. The 3 realms had only been born for 10,000 years, and there weren't many creatures born. It was already very good that so many people came. When he first became a saint, Luais was quite optimistic about the creatures of the 3 realms. He planned to find some outstanding people to nurture so that they could help him take care of the 9th heaven. But he didn't expect that the plan couldn't keep up with the changes. The birth of the Buzhou divine race made Luais see another possibility. It wasn't a bad idea to let this race take care of the 9th heaven and become the heavenly tribulation emissaries. Whether it was in terms of background or identity, they were quite suitable. Because of this, Luais, who had been optimistic about the creatures of the 3 realms, suddenly didn't care about them. Having the Buzhou divine race was enough for him. He didn't need to spend so much effort to find talents from the creatures of the 3 realms. It saved him a lot of trouble. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, thousands of years had passed. Luai's sermon came to an end. The creatures who came were mixed with good and bad people. Luais didn't think much of them. Therefore, after the sermon, Luais didn't ask them to stay. He let them leave. The saints didn't leave. Instead, They stayed in the divine firmament palace to discuss the Tao with Luai's. Next, in a few thousand years, it would be Fuxi's turn to give a sermon. Everyone was going to go there. Because of this, they couldn't be bothered to go home again. They might as well wait for a while at Luai's place. After the sermon, they would go to the Emperor City to congratulate Fuxi. After all, he was a fellow Taoist in the past. He was also the first being in the three realms to achieve the Tao. The saints had to give him face. A few thousand years was just a blink of an eye in the saints' eyes. But in the eyes of some creatures, a few thousand years wasn't short. During this period of time, quite a few new sentient lifeforms had been born in the three dimensions. The first one was born. In their minds, other than the heavenly path inheritance, there was also the news of Fuxi Taoist Master's sermon. Although they didn't know why, these newly born creatures instinctively knew that this was a rare opportunity. Therefore, without any hesitation, these living beings quickly rushed towards the central God province after stabilizing their cultivation. Fuxi was the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian, not a saint. He didn't need to be as particular as Luai's. Therefore, he didn't need to limit the number of people who could attend. It was really a convenient place for those who were fated to attend. Because of this, countless creatures gathered at the foot of Sky-Gazing Peak. It was simply a sea of people. Among them, the human race made up the most of the population. Couldn't be helped. After all, the human race had the geographical advantage. The closer they were, the faster they would come. Of course, this was all part of Fuxi's plan. Otherwise, he wouldn't have set the location of his sermon at Emperor City. His sermon this time was mainly for the human race. As for the other creatures, they were really just incidental. Where was Emperor City? It was the center of the central God province and also the center of the human race. Countless humans lived around it. There were no traces of other races at all. If Fuxi were to preach here, it would be good if 1 in 10,000 creatures who came to listen to his sermon were from another race. Under such circumstances, they could still come to listen to Fuxi's sermon. It had to be said that they were truly fated to be here. They had a great fate with Fuxi. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to come to Sky-Gazing Peak. After calculating the time, everyone left Divine Firmament Palace together and rushed to Sky-Gazing Peak. They each found a seat and sat down. This time, everyone came together. They didn't have any thoughts of competing. Instead, it was very harmonious. Soon, Fuxi's sermon began. It was different from Lei Zhe. Lei Zhe mainly talked about the innate Tao of thunder and then the Tao of calamities. He explained the principles of the various calamities in the world. Fuxi talked about the Tao of innate 8 trigrams. Then, from the innate 8 trigrams, he extended the principles of the universe's evolution. He explained the various principles of the universe to the world. Comprehending by analogy was what all living beings learned. Unlike Lei Zhe and Fuxi, after listening to their sermon, they also gained a lot and their cultivation improved by 1 or 2 points. To be honest, listening to Fuxi and Lei Zhe's sermon didn't mean much to the saints. But to those with great divine abilities, it had an extraordinary meaning. Because they were all in the Sage-to-Be realm. They had reached the extreme and were about to break through the realm of primordial Daluo Jingxian. They, who were in this special realm, needed to accumulate experience. Any great path could be used as a reference for them. If they could gain 1 or 2 points of understanding from the sermon, then their chances of breaking through to primordial Daluo Jingxian would increase by 1 or 2 points. This was also the reason why Fuxi's Lei Zhe Dao lecture attracted so many powerful cultivators to listen in. They wanted to break through the realm of primordial Daluo Jingxian, so they didn't want to let go of any opportunity to accumulate experience. The great mediums in the untainted land were all proud and arrogant people. None of them intended to forcefully attain the primordial chaos Tao fruit. They all thought that as long as their foundation was strong enough, they would naturally be able to break through to the primordial chaos zenith heaven golden immortal. This way, primordial Daluo Jingxian would not only be strong enough but also be able to break through several small realms. Should they break through to primordial Daluo Jingxian directly and then slowly level up, or should they temporarily suppress their realms and gain more when breaking through to primordial chaos? In everyone's hearts, they were all very smart. Was there even a need to say how they would choose? They had waited for hundreds of millions of years. What was a few million years more? Fushi's sermon was the same as Lei Zai's. It lasted for 3,000 years. Fushi was used to being alone and didn't have any intention of taking in disciples. Therefore, after the sermon, he dismissed everyone. After that, the powerful beings bid farewell to Fushi one after another. After listening to the sermons of two primordial chaos experts, they had also gained a lot. It was time to go back into seclusion for a period of time to organize their recent gains. However, these powerful beings had good thoughts, but they didn't have the time to go into seclusion. That was because not long after they returned to their cave abodes, the Grand Pure One's grand voice suddenly sounded between heaven and earth. Poor Wei Pangu perfected Tai Ching will preach the Tao on Mount Shouyang of the East Continent in 10,000 years. Anyone in the three realms who is fated can come and listen. Not long after the Grand Pure One finished speaking, the voice of the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning sounded between heaven and earth. Poor Wei Pangu perfected Yuqing will preach the Tao on Mount Kunlun of the East Continent in 20,000 years. Anyone in the three realms who is fated can come and listen. As soon as the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning finished speaking, the voice of the Grandmaster of Heaven sounded. Poor Wei Pangu perfected Shangqing will preach the Tao on Golden Ao Island of the East Continent in 30,000 years. Anyone in the three realms who is fated can come and listen. After the three pure ones, the voices of the two saints of the West also sounded. Poor Wei Taoist Jia Yin of the West will preach the Tao on Mount Meru of the Aparagodania continent in 40,000 years. Anyone in the three realms who is fated can come and listen. Poor Wei Taoist Juanti of the West will preach the Tao on Mount Meru of the Aparagodania continent in 50,000 years. Anyone in the three realms who is fated can come and listen. After the five saints, Goddess Nuwa, who had never shown her face, actually spoke. Poor Wei Nuwa perfected Nuwa of the Palace of Empress Hua will preach the Tao in 60,000 years. Anyone in the three realms who is fated can come and listen to the Tao on Mount Feng of the Central Divine Region. That was not the end. Even Goddess Hutu spoke. Poor Wei Pangu perfected Hutu will preach the Tao in 70,000 years on account of the fact that it is not easy for the living beings of the three realms to cultivate. Anyone who is fated can come and listen to the Hutu shrine of the Nanjian continent. The moment the seven saints finished speaking, everyone was surprised. They did not understand why the seven saints would preach the Tao at the same time. However, this was also a good thing. After listening to the seven saints preach the Tao, their chances of breaking through to primordial chaos Dalio Jinxian would undoubtedly be much higher. However, these great beings did not know that the seven saints preached the Tao not because they wanted to, but because it was a task given to them by the heavenly Tao. They wanted them to preach the Tao for the living beings of the three realms and open up the wisdom of all living beings. This was different from Lei Zai's preaching. Lei Zai's preaching of the Tao was originally to take in disciples. Therefore, he limited the number of people to 3,000. However, the seven saints preached the Tao to open up the wisdom of all living beings and preach the truth of the Tao. Therefore, they focused on the wide range and not on the quality. Like Fushi, they could open up the door for anyone who was fated to come and listen. In 70,000 years, seven saints preached the Tao. On average, one saint preached the Tao every 10,000 years. When the living beings of the three realms heard this news, they were so happy that they almost went crazy. What kind of era was this that seven saints preached the Tao at the same time? If the Heavenly Tribulation Saint and Heavenly Emperor Fushi were included, it would be 9 supreme experts preaching the Tao at the same time. Such a scene was probably not even seen when the 6 saints had just attained the Tao. It was really unique. For a moment, the living beings of the three realms were extremely excited. They felt that the Tao was right in front of them. Prosperous era. A resplendent era. Chapter 835. In the blink of an eye, 70,000 years had passed. At this moment, more than half of the living beings born in the three realms had been born. The originally extremely empty three realms gradually showed some signs of life. The seven saints' Tao preaching had also ended not long ago. Fortunately, with the help of the saints' Tao preaching, the newborn living beings of the three realms not only understood the realm after Dalio Taoist priests, but also knew the current situation of the three realms and the division of the major factions. They had finally gotten rid of their illiterate status. It was truly a joyous occasion. Apart from that, due to the Seven Saints' Tao preaching, many experts had also appeared in the world. When Feng Zichen was bored, he counted. In 70,000 years, a total of 120,000 Khanate Tao Lords had been born. Among these 120,000 Khanate Tao Lords, about 100,000 of them had broken through after being inspired by the Saints' Tao preaching. The Saints' Tao preaching was truly boundless. It had given birth to so many experts in the three realms. Feng Zichen was very happy about this. Of course, he was delighted. More than a third of the 120,000 Xiantian Tao Lords belonged to the human race. Other than the Seven Saints' Tao preaching, Feng Zichen had personally rushed over when Goddess Nuwa and Goddess Hutu were preaching. He had not been present when the other saints, namely the three pure ones and the two saints of the West, were preaching. However, although Feng Zichen did not go, the human experts did not miss a single one. Not only did they go, but they also went in groups, bringing all the geniuses of the human clan with them. Although it was a little ugly on the surface, it was all for the development of the race. It was not embarrassing at all. On the contrary, the human experts were willing to go all out for the sake of the race. They had the demeanor of the two saints of the West. With the two saints of the West as role models, the human experts naturally did not feel embarrassed. Moreover, listening to the Saints' Tao preaching would not form karma, so why not listen? It would be a waste not to listen. Even a blade of grass could become an immortal after listening to the Saints' Tao preaching, let alone the human prodigies. Moreover, they had not only listened to one Saint's Tao preaching. Including Fushi's Tao preaching, they had listened to 8 Saints' Tao preaching. 8 sages' sermons. It was equivalent to these human sky prides going through the baptism of 8 great Taos. Even the slightest bit of comprehension would benefit them endlessly. Moreover, if they still couldn't make any breakthroughs, then they wouldn't be worthy of being called geniuses of the human race. Nearly 50,000 Xiantian Tao Lords had been born. This was an excellent result. At the very least, the human race's foundation would improve significantly. However, although many Tai Taoist lords had been born in the past 70,000 years, not a single Daluo Taoist priest had been born. Although the three realms were growing increasingly prosperous, it was even more difficult for Taoist priests to prove their Tao and transcend the river of destiny. There were 2 reasons for this. First, it was because there were already enough primordial Taoist priests in the world. Counting those Xiantian Taoist priests who had fallen, almost every Xiantian Tao was marked by a few Taoist priests. It had been said before that the path of Tao validation had always been the easiest for the first person. The further one went, the more difficult it would be. This was because the more marks one left, the harder it would be to prove a Xiantian Tao. Unless one's background was powerful enough to make a Tao master go easy on them, one would have to obediently endure the attacks of the Taoist priests' marks if they wanted to prove their Tao. Only by making it through could one successfully prove their Tao. If they couldn't, then sorry. Not only would they fail to prove their Tao, but in serious cases they might even die. Proving one's Tao after another had always been a very dangerous thing. Therefore, it was also an advantage to be born early. In the past 70,000 years, many peak Tao Lords had tried to prove their Tao and transcend the river of destiny to become the indestructible Taoist priests. Unfortunately, they all failed and most of them died in the struggle for Tao. The power of a Xiantian Tao was ultimately limited. Many Xiantian Taoist priests didn't want to see latecomers prove their Tao. Back then, when Suiren proved his Tao, if not for the protection of the sacred beast Juyen, who warned the many Taoist priests of the Xiantian Fire Tao, Suiren might not have been able to achieve Tao so easily. Even Feng Zichen had to go all the way to the great chaos outside the primordial world to prove his Tao, not daring to do so in the primordial world. The cruelty of the struggle for Tao could be seen from this. Apart from the struggle for Tao, there was another tribulation in the Three Realms era to prove one's Daluo Tao, and that was the tribulation of merit. In the Three Realms, not everyone could prove their Tao just because they wanted to. They also needed to have the qualifications. Only those with merit were qualified to prove their Tao. How much merit was needed? It wasn't much. If one really had to describe it, it could be said that if this merit was used on an ordinary person, It could raise him from a mortal with no dermic powers to the level of Dalio Jingxian. Note that it was Dalio Jingxian, not Dalio Taoist priests. The difference between the two was more than 10,000 times. In the eyes of Feng Zichen and company, this amount of merit was nothing. Could be said to be pitifully low. However, in the eyes of the living beings of the three realms, this amount of merit was an astronomical figure. It was enough for them to accumulate for millions of years. In this era, there were just too few ways to obtain merit. They could only start from small matters and accumulate it bit by bit. Only by accumulating enough merit would one have the qualifications to prove their Tao. This was the threshold of Tao validation. Although the struggle for Tao was dangerous, if one did not accumulate enough merit, they would not even have the qualifications to participate in the struggle for Tao. If one did not accumulate enough merit and chose to forcefully prove their Tao, what would happen? It was simple. First, congratulations on gaining the attention of a saint. The newly ascended saint, Blue Eyes, would cast a wisp of his spiritual will, bringing heavenly punishment, to let the world know the consequences of defying the heavenly Tao. The path of Tao validation was difficult. Difficult. Merit and the struggle for Tao were the two mountains in the hearts of many peak Tao lords. If they could not move them, they would not be able to prove their Tao. They would not be able to transcend the long river of fate and cultivate to the realm of the immortal Daluo Taoist priests. On the sky-gazing peak, Feng Zichen stood alone at the peak of the mountain and looked down at the billions of mountains and rivers. Everything in the world appeared clearly in front of his eyes. No divine ability or array formation could block his vision. He was just that powerful. With this glance, he could see everything in the world. Inevitably, the figures of many peak Tao lords who were in seclusion appeared in Feng Zichen's eyes. Looking at them bitterly searching for the great Tao, unable to obtain it and scratching their ears and cheeks, Feng Zichen could not help but feel a myriad of emotions in his heart. At the same time, his heart seemed to be touched and trembled inexplicably. Then, Feng Zichen vaguely understood that his opportunity seemed to have arrived. Opportunity? Thinking to this point, Feng Zichen withdrew his thoughts and began to think carefully. At his level, what opportunity in the three realms could resonate with him? Out of curiosity, Feng Zichen began to calculate. At this moment, accompanied by the sound of a grand bell, Donghuang Tai's voice suddenly resounded between heaven and earth. Poor Wei Tai has sensed that it is not easy for foreign species to cultivate, so he has decided to preach the great Tao in the North Continent's Sun God Palace 10,000 years later. All sentient and heartless beings in the three realms can come and listen to the great Tao if they are fated. Tai's voice came suddenly, and Feng Zichen's thoughts were inevitably interrupted. However, he was not angry. He only looked at the North Continent playfully. It was not easy for foreign species to cultivate. Interesting, really interesting. Tai was actually going to preach the great Tao for foreign species. Did he sense the threat of the human race and could not wait to target the human race? What was a foreign species? It was very simple. Apart from the witch race and the human race, everyone else was a foreign species. Tai's purpose for preaching the great Tao to the foreign species was very obvious. He wanted to rope in the foreign species to target the human race. Otherwise, Tai's words just now would not be about how difficult it was for the foreign species in the three realms to cultivate, but how difficult it was for all living beings in the three realms to cultivate. With one word, he excluded the human race and the witch race. Tai was also a good person. No, the purpose of Tai's preaching should not be so simple. For some reason, Feng Zichen felt that something was wrong. Donghuang Tai was Feng Zichen's greatest imaginary enemy, and there was no other. Ever since Feng Zichen stepped into the door of cultivation, he had always been afraid of Donghuang Tai and Dijun. For this, Feng Zichen had seriously studied Donghuang Tai and knew that he was a very proud and powerful person. Of course, he did not lack wisdom. It was just that he rarely used his wisdom, because Tai was too strong. In his eyes, there was no problem that the bell of chaos could not solve. If there was, he would ring the bell of chaos a few more times. Tai's strength concealed his wisdom. However, this did not mean that he was a boorish man. On the contrary, How could someone in Tai's position be a boorish man? How could a boorish man suppress all the geniuses of the same generation and make them unable to raise their heads and feel inferior? Tai was a person with great wisdom, therefore his actions must have a deep meaning. If he wanted to deal with the human race, it was far from enough to rope in the foreign species. The human race occupied the best place and the best resources in the three realms. In addition, the human race was especially fertile. Therefore, the human race's development speed would only be faster than that of the foreign species. One had to know that the human race was the protagonist of the world. All the foreign species would be suppressed by an invisible force. The most typical example was that although the foreign species' combat strength was strong, their cultivation speed was slow and their fertility was extremely low. The human race had never treated any race with low fertility as an opponent because there was no need. Although Donghuang Tai was trying to rope in the foreign species, the effect was probably not very good. Although the foreign species were strong, they could only cause some trouble for the human race. They could not be a threat to the human race. On the contrary, Donghuang Tai's actions of roping in the foreign species and becoming enemies with the human race would probably backfire. In the era of the three realms, the human race was basically invincible. No race was a match for the human race. For this, Feng Zichen was very worried. One had to know that a race without an opponent was not far from decline. However, Donghuang Tai's actions had nurtured an enemy like the foreign species for the human race. Although it would bring some trouble to the human race, it could also stimulate the human race's fighting spirit. According to this calculation, the benefits clearly outweighed the disadvantages. It was impossible for Donghuang Tai not to understand such a simple logic. However, he still did it. Then what was his goal? Why did he do such a thankless thing? It was clearly not worth it for Donghuang Tai to do so just to rope in the foreign species. Wait, rope in? Suddenly, Feng Zichen seemed to understand something. Donghuang Tai's lecture this time was probably not to rope in the foreign species, but the many great mystical abilities of the primordial world. How was he going to rope in the great mystical abilities? It was simple. First, he would invite everyone over to listen to the Tao. Then, during the lecture, he would talk about his insights when he broke through to primordial chaos Dalio Jingxian, as well as his understanding of the primordial chaos realm. This way, if the great mystical abilities had any insights, they would owe Donghuang Tai a favor. With this favor, even if they were not roped in by Tai, it would not be easy for them to become enemies with him in the future. In this way, Tai's goal would be achieved. In order to deal with the human race and the Magi, Tai would definitely think of a way to revive the ancient demon god and Dijun. Unfortunately, the great mystical abilities would definitely not be willing to see the demon race return to its peak. For this reason, if Donghuang Tai wanted to revive the ancient demon god and Dijun, everyone would definitely stop him and destroy his actions. However, that was in the past. If everyone owed Tai a favor, it would not be easy for them to attack him and stop him from reviving the ancient demon god and Dijun. In fact, in order to end this karma, they would even secretly help Tai. The karma of achieving the Tao was not just a saying. If someone really understood the opportunity to achieve the Tao because of Tai's words, then this karma would be greatly owed. Even if they did not want to be tied to the demon race, in order to repay the karma, they would have to walk on the demon race's chariot. Tai's plan was very brilliant. How was it brilliant? This was an open scheme. Even if the great mystical abilities knew Tai's plan, they would not choose not to go. This was because the temptation of achieving the Tao was too great. No one could refuse it. In addition, the saints were also involved. Because the heavenly Tao did not like primordial chaos Dalio Jingxian, when the saints preached the Tao, they did not mention anything about the primordial chaos realm. In other words, other than Tao ancestor Hongjun, this was the first time Tai had talked about the Tao of primordial chaos. The great mystical abilities had no room to refuse. If they missed this opportunity, who knew if there would be another one? Therefore, they would definitely go. Similarly, the saints would not stop them from going to Tai's place to listen. If they really blocked the way, it would be the enmity of blocking the Tao. The consequences were too severe. Even the saints did not dare to do it. At this time, even if Feng Zichen also announced that he was about to talk about the Tao of primordial chaos, it would be too late. This was because, although they were both talking about the Tao of primordial chaos, Feng Zichen was completely at a disadvantage in front of Dong Huangtai. Dong Huangtai was from the celestial sect of wonders. His method of achieving the Tao was the most orthodox method of severing three corpses. It was also the path that the great mystical abilities of the celestial sect of wonders were taking. It was the most suitable method for the great mystical abilities of the celestial sect of wonders. As for Feng Zichen's method of achieving the Tao, it was a method of achieving the Tao through strength. It was the most difficult method to achieve the Tao. In comparison, if Feng Zichen and Dong Huangtai preached at the same time, wouldn't it be obvious who the great mystical abilities from the celestial sect of wonders would listen to? Who would not listen to the orthodox method of achieving the Tao and come to the human race to listen to Feng Zichen talk about how to achieve the Tao through strength? Wouldn't that be crazy? Chapter 836. Feng Zichen would not do something that would humiliate himself. Shaking his head, Feng Zichen turned around and returned to the human emperor palace. It was time for him to prepare for the sermon. Just now, through the actions of the Dong Huangtai, he had already understood where his opportunity should be. It was on the matter of the sermon. The Khanate Tao ancestor, Taoist Hongjun, had once preached the Tao in the chaotic purple cloud palace in outer space. Thus, he had started the prosperity of the primordial world and the glory of the immortal Tao. He had also established his supreme status as a Tao ancestor. After that, the heavenly Tao ancestor, Feng Zichen, other than passing down the Tao of the God-fiend and martial Tao, he did not seem to have preached the Tao to all living beings, nor did he start the postnatal era. As for the glory of the postnatal era, it had never happened. Now, although the three realms were prosperous, it continued the glory of the Khanate era, the glory of Tao ancestor Hongjun. Could not be said that it had nothing to do with the postnatal era and Feng Zichen. It could only be said that it had little to do with it. That would not do. How could the Khanate Tao be popular in the postnatal era? Yes, the postnatal Tao was inferior to the Khanate Tao. This was where the postnatal Tao was inferior to the Khanate Tao. It was also its greatest disadvantage. For this reason, even Feng Zichen, who was the postnatal Tao ancestor, cultivated the Khanate Tao. However, this could not deny the postnatal Tao. Even someone as strong as Feng Zichen could not make the postnatal Tao stronger than the Khanate Tao. However, he could make the postnatal Tao the foundation of cultivating the Khanate Tao and transform the postnatal Tao into the Khanate Tao. One had to know that there was no sword Tao in the primordial world. It was Feng Zichen who created the sword Tao and reversed it from the postnatal Tao to the Khanate Tao. He embedded it in the origin of the world and became one of the cornerstones of the world. That was why the primordial world had the sword Tao, the Khanate sword Tao. Feng Zichen was very experienced in reversing the postnatal Tao, and his opportunity was related to this. The Khanate Tao was extremely powerful, but difficult to cultivate. The postnatal Tao was easy to cultivate, but it was not as powerful as the Khanate Tao. What Feng Zichen wanted to do was to pass down the method of reversing the acquired path into the innate path. Let all living beings build their foundation with the post-celestial Tao, and when the time was ripe, they could then cultivate the pre-celestial Tao. This was Feng Zichen's opportunity, his merit, and his duty as the post-celestial Tao ancestor. Just like the Khanate Tao ancestor, Taoist Hongjun, who preached in the Purple Cloud Palace and opened the door to the Tao for the Khanate lifeforms. The post-celestial Tao ancestor, Feng Zichen, should also pass down the great Tao and open the door to the great Tao for the countless post-celestial beings. Only by fulfilling his duty could Feng Zichen be considered a true post-celestial Tao ancestor, respected by both heaven and earth. The Hotian living beings had been waiting for a long time, and it was time for Feng Zichen to fulfill his duty as the Hotian Tao ancestor. Taking advantage of the time when Dong Huangtai was preaching, Feng Zichen could organize his own understanding so that he could organize a suitable transformation method and impart it to the masses. In the blink of an eye, 13,000 years had passed. At this time, Dong Huangtai's preaching finally came to an end. Not long after everyone left the demon imperial palace, Feng Zichen's voice suddenly sounded between heaven and earth, resounding in every corner of the three realms. The poor Wei Pangu Zichen clan feels that it is not easy for the post-celestial beings to cultivate, so I have decided to preach the great Tao 10,000 years later. Anyone who cultivates the post-celestial Tao can come to the Tree of World to listen. The moment Feng Zichen's voice fell, all the living beings in the three realms who cultivated the post-celestial Tao suddenly had a mysterious feeling, as if their opportunity was about to arrive. Whim. The whim that was unique to cultivators. With this feeling, it meant that the sage emperor of the human clan's preaching had an opportunity to prove their Tao. Thinking of this, all the post-celestial cultivators went crazy. Almost without any hesitation, they each used their magic and flew towards the central divine province. Although there were still 10,000 years before the sage emperor of the human clan's preaching, everyone was afraid that they would not be able to find a seat if they were late. Therefore, they did not dare to hesitate at all. They flew as fast as they could to the central divine province. As for where the Tree of World was, everyone in the three realms knew this. The Tree of World was in the center of the central divine province, which was also the center of the three realms. It was the second sacred land of the primordial world. It was said that cultivating under the Tree of World would increase the chances of proving one's Tao by 30% compared to the outside world. What did 30% mean? One had to know that many people failed to prove their Tao, and the difference was only 10%. With an increase of 30%, more than 80% of the Tai Dao lords in the primordial world would be able to prove their Tao. Daluo Taoist priests. If this was not a sacred land, then what could be called a sacred land? Unfortunately, such a sacred land could only be ranked second and not first. One really did not know how extraordinary the number one sacred land of the three realms was. As for where the number one sacred land was and what it was, no one in the three realms knew. Some said it was the Tao ancestors' purple cloud palace, some said it was the great Emperor Ziwei's boundless starry sky, some said it was the Dongshang divine province's Kunlun mountain, or the former Buzhou sacred mountain, and some even said there was no such thing as the number one sacred land. In short, there were many theories, but none of them could be conclusive. No one with great divine abilities came out to tell them what the number one sacred land of the three realms was. In any case, it was very mysterious, and everyone had been guessing. However, although no one knew what the number one sacred land of the three realms was, everyone knew that the number two sacred land of the three realms was under the Tree of World. Because of this, many people rushed to the central divine province at this time. They might have the intention to take the opportunity to cultivate under the Tree of World. That was under the Tree of World. Who did not want to cultivate under it? However, without the permission of the sage emperor of the human clan, even saints could not approach it, let alone these ordinary cultivators. Today, all the living beings of the three realms knew what a saint was. They were the peak of the three realms, the spokesperson of the heavenly Tao, the controller of the universe, an unattainable existence. Naturally, no one dared to have any delusions about a place that even saints could not approach. But now the situation was different. The sage emperor of the human clan wanted to preach under the Tree of World. Naturally, he would not stop them from cultivating under the Tree of World. This was an unprecedented opportunity. Of course, they had to seize it tightly. Cultivating under the Tree of World for a day was better than cultivating in the mortal world for 100 years. It could be said that there were two opportunities for Feng Zichen to preach the Tao this time. The first was the Tao he wanted to preach, and the second was under the Tree of World. It was with this idea that many cultivators who cultivated the Khanate Tao also rushed to the central divine province. Even if they could not hear the Tao, being able to cultivate under the Tree of World was also an opportunity. Unfortunately, cultivators who cultivated the Khanate Tao were destined to be disappointed. This time, Feng Zichen said that he wanted to preach the Tao for cultivators who cultivated the Khanate Tao, so he only preached the Tao for them. Cultivators who cultivated the Khanate Tao could not enter the area covered by the Tree of World. Normally, Feng Zichen might not be so stingy, but it was different now. After the news that he was going to preach the Tao under the Tree of World spread, the number of Khanate living beings who came would be beyond imagination. In order to make room for these cultivators, it was better to let the cultivators who cultivated the Khanate Tao stay behind for the time being. Even Tao ancestor Hongjun had to talk about relationships. As a human, Feng Zichen was no exception. In fact, it was even more serious than Tao ancestor Hongjun. After Feng Zichen preached the Tao, anyone who cultivated the Khanate Tao or was born as a Khanate living being would be counted as his disciples and granddisciples. But cultivators who cultivated the Khanate Tao were not. Wouldn't this relationship become estranged all of a sudden? The saints knew far more about Feng Zichen's preaching than the people of the world. Almost as soon as his voice fell, the saints had already seen the purpose of Feng Zichen's action from the heavenly secrets. The Khanate Tao ancestor was finally going to fulfill his duty and step onto the path he should take. He would open the door to the great Tao for all living beings in the Khanate world and start his own glorious era. However, seeing was one thing. Just like how the saints could not stop the Eastern Emperor Tai from preaching the Tao, they could not stop Feng Zichen from preaching the Tao. The prosperity of the Khanate living beings was the general trend. Could not be reversed or changed. Feng Zichen preaching the Tao to the world was an act of following the heavens. Those who were his enemies would be going against the trend and would not be able to escape the fate of being crushed. The saints naturally would not do such a stupid thing. On Mount Kunlun, the heavenly lord of primordial beginning pondered for a while. Suddenly, he ordered the white crane boy to summon all his disciples other than Jade Capital. They were the 8 golden immortals of Chan School and a few in-name disciples. These disciples had a few things in common. Firstly, they all had Daluo Jinxian's realm. Secondly, they all cultivated the Khanate Tao. In other words, if they went to listen to Feng Zichen's preaching, they would all benefit. The heavenly lord of primordial beginning had asked them to come here for this. The heavenly lord of primordial beginning knew that without his permission, his disciples would not go even if the opportunity was right in front of them. However, his disciples could choose not to go, but as their master, he could not ignore it. He had already delayed them for too long. He could not let them continue to delay. Otherwise, these disciples would really be crippled. With that thought in mind, the heavenly lord of primordial beginning could not help but say, "This time, fellow Taoist Gaochen will preach the Tao personally. This time, all of you will follow me." Feng Zichen's preaching of the Tao was probably the only chance for the golden immortals of Chan School to attain the Tao. If they missed it, their future would be unpredictable. No, it was not unpredictable. They would just be surpassed by the juniors one by one. It was truly miserable. It was truly worse than death. The heavenly lord of primordial beginning also knew that he could not ruin their opportunity this time. Otherwise, if this continued, the relationship between master and disciple would really be gone. No matter how deep their relationship was, it would become thinner after experiencing so many things. If they became enemies, it would really become the biggest joke in the primordial world. "Thank you for your help, master." After hearing the heavenly lord of primordial beginning's words, the immortals of Chan School hurriedly bowed with joy. With their intelligence, it was naturally not difficult to guess the reason why the heavenly lord of primordial beginning brought them to watch the ceremony. That was precisely why they were happy. Originally, they had already made up their minds. For the sake of their master's face, they would not go to Feng Zichen's preaching of the Tao this time. However, they did not expect that just as they rejected, their master had already made up his mind to bring them to the world tree to listen to the Tao. This surprise really came too suddenly. Attaining the Tao was the obsession of the disciples of Chan School. Now that they finally saw this possibility, the excitement in their hearts could be imagined. It was a pity that the 4 senior brothers had entered the God role. Within this calamity, there was probably no hope of attaining the Tao. Seeing the reaction of the disciples below, the heavenly lord of primordial beginning knew that he had made the right decision this time. Not only did he redeem his relationship with his disciples, but he had also indirectly avoided a huge crisis regarding Chan School. His disciples had been living too sullenly in recent years. It was difficult for him to tell outsiders about the sadness. Fortunately, if nothing unexpected happened, their bitter days would come to an end. At that moment on Golden Ao Island, unlike the heavenly lord of primordial beginning, the Grandmaster of Heaven did not have much resistance to bringing his disciples to the world tree to listen to the Tao. The reason was very simple. Not to mention his relationship with the human race. His remaining disciples all had a very good relationship with the human race. It could be said that most of the infrastructure of the human race was created by them. If they went to the human race, even the Khanate Taoist priests of the human race would have to treat them with respect and thank them for their kindness. Also, not to mention anything else, the three pure ones could be said to have paid a huge price in the battle between the chaos and the Khanate ferocious beasts. They had provided hundreds of Khanate numinous treasures to the human race. Grudges and favors had to be settled clearly. The matter of Feng Zichen preaching the Tao could be said to be a stone that stirred up thousands of waves. The three realms, which had been peaceful for many years, was stirred up. When there were still 300 years before Feng Zichen's Tao preaching began, all the great mystical abilities took action and went to the World Tree to watch the ceremony. Another 200 years later, the saints and the various primordial chaos experts also took action, especially the saints. They basically brought all the disciples who cultivated the postnatal Tao. If it were an ordinary primordial chaos expert preaching, the saints could choose not to come. However, it was different this time. Feng Zichen was confirming his postnatal Tao ancestor path and using it to achieve supreme Tao. As the top existences in the primordial world, everyone naturally had to come to watch the ceremony and witness this scene personally. In fact, when Feng Zichen's Tao preaching was approaching, even the person from the Purple Cloud Palace had left for the lower realm. He, the old man, wanted to witness this scene with his own eyes. By the time the saints arrived at the World Tree, the place was already filled with figures. It was like a sea of people, and the number was no less than hundreds of millions. They were all Daluo Jingxian and Tai Jingxian. It was also at this time that the saints realized that there were actually so many Daluo Jingxian in the three realms. As far as the eye could see, there were no less than 1 million. There were even more Tai Jingxian, no less than hundreds of millions. There were too many. There were really too many. No wonder the heavenly Tao was determined to reduce the number of immortals. For this reason, it did not hesitate to give up a saint position. There were really too many immortals in the three realms. If they were allowed to continue growing, no matter how deep the three realms' foundation was, it would not be able to withstand such consumption. As they thought about it, the saints walked into the area covered by the World Tree. Then their expressions all changed. This was because they realized that in the range of the World Tree, even as strong as they were, their strength was suppressed by an inexplicable force. Chapter 837. Moreover, the closer they were to the Tree of World, the stronger the suppression. Was the Tree of World so terrifying? Even someone as strong as a saint would be suppressed by its power? For a moment, everyone's fear of Feng Zichen increased. They arrived under the Tree of World without saying a word. During this time, Feng Zichen didn't move to welcome them. The crowd did not mind this at all. Welcome? Welcome what? When Tao ancestor Hongjun preached in the Purple Cloud Palace, did you see him come out to welcome them? If you had a problem with it, you didn't have to come. Under the arrangement of a few human Khanate Taoist priests, the saints and the primordial chaos Tao masters took their seats one after another. At this time, it was almost time for the preaching. Feng Zichen was ready to start. However, suddenly, Feng Zichen, who was resting under the Tree of World with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes, stood up from the platform, and walked out. From the looks of it, he was going out to welcome someone. Who was he welcoming? Everyone who saw this scene began to ponder in their hearts. In the three realms, there were not many people who could make the Saint Emperor of the human race bow down to welcome them. Didn't you see that when the saint came in, he didn't move to welcome them? But at this moment, the old man moved. This meant that the identity of the person who came was more noble than the saint. More noble than the saint. Who could it be? Was there such a person in the three realms? Ever since the unification of the Tao ancestor Hongjun gradually faded out of everyone's sight. Until now, only those with great divine abilities and a few Khanate Taoist priests knew of his existence. The rest had never heard of Tao ancestor Hongjun. If not, the world wouldn't call the three pure ones Tao ancestor. The creatures of the three realms only knew of Tao ancestor, but not Tao ancestor Hongjun. Therefore, they recognized the three pure ones as Tao ancestors. Because of this, when the world worshipped the three pure ones, they gradually called them Tao ancestors. The three pure ones didn't deny this. They, who created the heavenly immortal path, were indeed qualified to call themselves Tao ancestors. Because they didn't know of Tao Father Hongjun's existence, saints were the limit of what the living beings of the three dimensions could imagine. As for existences that were even more formidable than saints, they'd utterly never imagined such a thing. Now, from Feng Zichen's actions, they guessed that an existence beyond the saint level was about to descend. One could imagine the shock in their hearts. While everyone was still in shock, the sages and many great mediums had already guessed who it was. Therefore, after Feng Zichen left, they also went out to welcome him. This scene caused everyone's eyelids to twitch. He was certain that the person who had come was a great existence that surpassed the saints. With such a big lineup, he really didn't know who this person was. And how great was he? With this thought in mind, everyone turned to look in the direction where the others had left. They wanted to catch a glimpse of that great figure. Unfortunately, their thoughts were destined to fail. How could the sacred face of Tao ancestor Hongjun be something they could see? Since the Tao ancestor had already made up his mind to fade out of the eyes of the world, he would not let people remember his existence. Outside the Tree of World, Feng Zichen very respectfully bowed to a purple-robed Taoist priest and said, "Zichen is terrified. I didn't expect that today's matter would alarm you, Tao ancestor." Regardless of the grievances between Feng Zichen and Tao ancestor Hongjun, at least in name, Feng Zichen was still his junior, so he had to maintain proper etiquette when meeting him. Tao ancestor Hongjun stepped forward to help Feng Zichen up and said with a smile, "You're also someone who's going to become a Tao ancestor. In the future, you'll be a Poor Wei's friend. Why are you so terrified when you see the Poor Wei?" Postnatal Tao ancestors and connate Tao ancestors were all Tao ancestors, and they were all existences that opened the door to the great Tao for living beings. There was no distinction between nobility and lowliness. Even if the postnatal Tao was inferior to the connate Tao, it was still the same. While the two of them were talking, all the sages and the great mediums arrived. They all bowed to Tao ancestor Hongjun and said, "Greetings, master." Waving his hand to let them get up, Tao ancestor Hongjun said, "Don't block the door. Quickly go in with the Poor Wei. Don't delay the time of the North Star's preaching." While speaking, Tao ancestor Hongjun and Feng Zichen walked towards the Tree of World together. However, Tao ancestor Hongjun deliberately walked half a step behind Feng Zichen, so as not to steal his limelight. Tao ancestors had always been very attentive to details. When they arrived in front of the Tree of World, Tao ancestor Hongjun seemed to have sensed something and raised his head. He stared at the Tree of World for a long time, then said with a smile, "With this divine tree, the untainted land has nothing to worry about." After saying that, Tao ancestor Hongjun turned his head to look at the people behind him. He seemed to be warning and reminding them, "It's fine today, but if it's any other time, you must remember not to get within hundreds of millions of miles of the Tree of World. If the Tree of World is damaged because of you, don't blame the Poor Wei for being ruthless and personally coming out to clean up the sect." Seeing that Tao ancestor Hongjun was serious and even said that he would clean up the sect, everyone was shocked and hurriedly promised, "Master teacher, don't worry. If there's nothing important, we will definitely not step into the Central God Province with our true bodies." In order to show their determination, everyone did not even come to the Central God Province, let alone get close to the Tree of World. Hearing that, Tao ancestor Hongjun could not help but nod in satisfaction. The Tree of World had grown to this extent and had become one of the pillars of the untainted land. Whether the three realms could continue to advance in the future would probably depend on it. Therefore, Tao ancestor Hongjun valued the Tree of World so much that he could not allow it to make any mistakes. As the first living being born in the untainted land, the relationship between Tao ancestor Hongjun and the untainted land could not be severed. Because of that, Tao ancestor Hongjun, who had already become the primordial chaos Dalio Jinxian, eventually became a saint. That's right, Why was Tao ancestor Hongjun so powerful after becoming a saint? It was because before becoming a saint, he was already the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. The saints after that were different. They became saints in the sage-to-be realm. Before becoming a saint, the gap was already so big. After becoming a saint, the gap was undoubtedly even bigger. Tao ancestor Hongjun, who could not bear to part with the untainted land, really hoped that the untainted land would become stronger and stronger. Because only when the untainted land became stronger, his strength would become stronger. The two coexisted. Everyone present waited for a while and saw the saints escorting a Taoist who had the demeanor of an immortal walked in. As for what that Taoist looked like, what clothes he wore, and how strong he was, no one could see clearly. To be precise, it was not that they could not see clearly, but that they could not remember. That Taoist's figure did not seem to exist in the world. No matter how hard they tried, they could not remember his figure. Often, when they saw the Tao ancestor, they would forget his appearance in the next moment. Then, they would completely forget everything about the Tao ancestor. It was very mysterious. After the Tao ancestor took his seat, the Taoist priests rang the golden bell to signal for everyone to be silent. They also announced that the sermon was about to begin. Glancing at the postnatal living beings present, Feng Zichen suppressed all his thoughts and explained the principles that he had recently sorted out. In fact, what Feng Zichen wanted to talk about this time was not some mysterious principle, nor was it an explanation of the Khanate Tao and the postnatal Tao. Instead, he was explaining how to use the postnatal Tao to reverse the Khanate Tao. In the past, the Tao ancestor had taught 3 ways to become a saint. They were to become a saint through merit, to become a saint through killing 3 corpses, and to become a saint through strength. Now, Feng Zichen imitated the Tao ancestors' actions in the past and also taught the postnatal living beings present 3 ways to use the postnatal Tao to prove the Khanate Taoist priests. Firstly, he could integrate the postnatal Tao that he had proven into the corresponding Khanate Tao. In this way, the Tao he cultivated would become a branch of the Khanate Tao. He could also naturally prove the realm of the Khanate Taoist priests. However, although it was safe to use this method to prove the Tao, it was the most time-consuming. After proving the Tao, although he would have all the characteristics of the Daluo Taoist priests, his strength would be far inferior to the normal Taoist priests. Therefore, using this method to prove the Tao was not only time-consuming, but also the weakest of the 3 methods. Secondly, he could use the postnatal Tao to forcefully prove the Khanate Tao. To prove the Tao with this method, he had to first completely understand the postnatal Tao that he cultivated. Then, the Tao of heaven would evolve into the mysteries of the Khanate Tao. After fully comprehending the mysteries of the Khanate Tao, he would be able to transfer his life mark from the postnatal Tao to the Khanate Tao. In this way, the Taoist priest's realm would be completed. Using this method to prove the Tao, his strength would be stronger than the person who used the first method to prove the Tao. There would be no difference between his strength and the strength of a normal person who proved the Tao. Although this method was stronger, it tested the cultivator's comprehension ability. Only those with the qualifications of a Khanate godfiend could cultivate this method. The rest would not be able to cultivate it. Thirdly, which was also the strongest method to prove the Tao, was to go against the Khanate Tao. He would reverse the postnatal Tao that he cultivated and transform it into the Khanate Tao. Then, he would embed it into the origin of heaven and earth and become the foundation of heaven and earth. This method was the strongest method to achieve the Tao. Once he succeeded, not only would he become the ancestor of a Tao, he would also be able to obtain merit. His strength could be said to be the strongest among the Taoist priests. He would even be able to contend with a sage-to-be. Moreover, using this method to prove the Tao was equivalent to achieving the Tao in another way. Although he would not have the strength of a saint, he would have some of the privileges of a saint. He would almost be indestructible. Even a saint would not be able to kill him. This method to prove the Tao could be said to have many benefits. Of course, it was also the most difficult. Since the creation of heaven and earth, only Feng Zichen had achieved this. After the 3 methods were passed down, Feng Zichen's preaching of the Tao could be said to have been completed. The moment the voice fell, Feng Zichen immediately felt that the entire heaven and earth seemed to have become different. Endless luck gathered towards him, pushing his aura up layer by layer until it stopped at the 10th heaven of Hunyuan. In other words, with the blessing of luck, Feng Zichen could already exert the strength of the 10th heaven of Hunyuan. Dao Ancestor. After completing the preaching of the Dao, Feng Zichen finally completed his Dao fruit of the Dao Ancestor and became the second Dao Ancestor of the Untainted Land, the postnatal Dao Ancestor. The improvement of luck was one of the benefits of becoming a Dao Ancestor. However, it was not the greatest benefit. Everyone thought that the greatest benefit after becoming a Dao Ancestor was the blessing of heaven and earth. In fact, this was wrong. The greatest benefit of becoming a Dao Ancestor was never the blessing of heaven and earth, but the endless disciples. Once one became a Dao Ancestor, there would naturally be an additional powerful force under his command. After today, anyone who cultivated the methods taught by Feng Zichen would have to call him teacher when they saw him. The disciples, and grand disciples of these people would have to call Feng Zichen Ancestral Master and Dao Ancestor in the future. These would all become Feng Zichen's forces. The postnatal living beings all respected Feng Zichen. Then in the future, what could Feng Zichen not do? With a command, the world would follow. If he wanted to become the Celestial Emperor, he did not need to say it personally. After Hao Yan received the news, he would take the initiative to give the position to him. It was impossible not to give in. If he did not give in, the postnatal living beings in the world would rebel, overthrow Hao Yan's heavenly court, and then promote Feng Zichen to take the position. That was how it was to subdue the enemy without fighting. Why could Dao Ancestor Hongjun decide the position of Celestial Emperor with a single word? In addition to being strong enough, it was also because he was a Dao Ancestor. All the postnatal living beings had to listen to his orders. For this, the living being he designated was the Celestial Emperor. Even if it was not, all the postnatal living beings in the primordial world could use their willpower to push him to the position of Celestial Emperor. Now, Feng Zichen would have such power. Unfortunately, there were not only postnatal living beings in this world, but also postnatal living beings. Moreover, there were quite a few of them, causing his power to be greatly reduced. It was far from the grand occasion of Dao Ancestor Hongjun being respected by heaven and earth. Otherwise, Feng Zichen would be invincible. The postnatal Dao Ancestor had the word postnatal. Then, he could only order cultivators who cultivated the postnatal Dao. As for cultivators who cultivated the postnatal Dao, Feng Zichen could not control them. Bang! Thinking of this, Feng Zichen suddenly wanted to kill all the cultivators who cultivated the postnatal Dao in the 3 realms. In this way, wouldn't he become the boss of the 3 realms? That scene was exciting just thinking about it. Unfortunately, he could only think about it. If Feng Zichen really dared to do so, he would probably be surrounded and attacked by the 3,000 guests of the Purple Cloud Palace. After Feng Zichen's preaching, the people below did not immediately wake up. Instead, they fell into a state of enlightenment, constantly confirming the 3 methods that Feng Zichen had passed down. Seeing this, Feng Zichen did not disturb them. Instead, he continued to sit quietly on the platform, waiting for the people to wake up one after another. Just like that, 1,000 years passed. After 1,000 years, more than half of the cultivators below had woken up one after another. However, there were still some cultivators who did not wake up and were still comprehending the Tao. It was obvious that they had gained something, and those cultivators who had woken up did not leave. Instead, they seized this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and worked hard to cultivate under the world tree. Time flowed slowly, but at a certain moment, an inexplicable throbbing suddenly came from between heaven and earth, attracting everyone's attention. Everyone raised their heads and looked in the direction of the sound. They found that the source of this change was behind the primeval Lord of Heaven. It was the first disciple of the Chan sect, Guang Chengzi. A mysterious wave spread out from his body, resonating with heaven and earth, causing this change. Seeing this scene, everyone had a faint understanding in their hearts. Guang Chengzi was going to prove his Tao, the Daluo Taoist priests. Chapter 838. In terms of accumulation, Guang Qingzi definitely had enough. In terms of aptitude, there was no need to even mention it. The first disciple of the primordial Lord of Heaven, the leader of the 12 golden immortals of the Chan sect, was definitely a Khanate godfiend. If not for the fact that Guang Qingzi was the disciple of the primordial Lord of Heaven with his background, he would have reached the level of the Daluo Taoist priests as early as the Heavenly Emperor. It was really too late to attain the Tao now. However, although it was late, he still attained the Tao in the end. It could be considered as resolving one of Guang Qingzi's obsessions. At the same time, it also proved to the world that the method passed down by Feng Zichen was indeed feasible and could allow people to attain the Tao. Guang Qingzi had used the second method to attain the Tao of Daluo Jingxian, which was to forcefully attain the Khanate Tao with the postnatal Tao. Using this method to attain the Tao, one's combat strength was the same as a normal Tao attainment cultivator. After all, Guang Qingzi had been stuck in the realm of the Daluo Jingxian for countless years. He had also been stuck in the realm of the Tai Tao Lord for an eon. Before breaking through to become the Daluo Jingxian, Guang Qingzi and the other 12 golden immortals of the Chan sect were not Tai Jingxian, but Tai Tao Lords. Moreover, they were all at the peak of the Tao Lord realm and were only one step away from the Daluo Taoist priests. Therefore, Guang Qingzi's accumulation was already enough. All he lacked was the method to attain the Tao. Now that Feng Zichen had passed down the method of preaching the Tao, Guang Qingzi had comprehended it. Tens of millions of years of accumulation burst out in one day, directly pushing him to the realm of the Daluo Taoist priests. Rumble. In the void, a colorful rainbow bridge appeared and extended from an unknown place. It went straight between Guang Qingzi's eyebrows and took away his Khanate true spirit. That was the bridge of heaven and earth and also the bridge of Tao attainment. Stepping on this bridge indicated that the path of Tao attainment had been opened. At the end of the bridge was the Khanate Tao that Guang Qingzi cultivated. That was where the battle of Tao was. Only by defeating the mark left by the predecessors could Guang Qingzi truly achieve the realm of the Daluo Taoist priests. There was no right of Tao attainment. Thus, this battle was incomparably cruel. Throughout the history of the primeval age, 9 out of 10 of the Daluo Taoist priests who had attained the Tao had died in the struggle for Tao. In other words, out of 10 Tao verifiers, only one could succeed. The probability was extremely low, but the mortality rate was astonishing. However, it was clear that no matter how difficult the Tao struggle was, it could not stump Master Guangqing. No one believed that Guang Qingzi would fail in his Tao validation, and no one believed that he would die in the struggle for his Tao. There was no other reason. It was not because Guang Qingzi was strong enough, but because he was the disciple of the primordial Lord of Heaven. In addition, he was the first person to attain the Tao after Feng Zichen passed down the method of Tao attainment. The primeval Lord of Heaven would definitely want to ensure the safety of his disciple. As for Feng Zichen, in order to make the world believe that his method of confirming the Tao was feasible, he had to protect Guang Qingzi's life and ensure that he succeeded in confirming the Tao. Guang Qingzi was a living advertisement. Even if Feng Zichen didn't want to protect him, he had to. If Guang Qingzi failed in his Tao attainment, the effect of Feng Zichen's sermon would be at least halved. On the contrary, if Guang Qingzi succeeded in his Tao attainment, the effect of Feng Zichen's sermon would at least be doubled. Guang Qingzi was a typical example. He was an advertisement. Therefore, Feng Zichen would definitely not let anything happen to him. The primordial Lord of Heaven also thought so. As the first Khanate Taoist priest under his sect and the pillar of Chan school in the future, Guang Qingzi must not be harmed. Although the primeval age was a place that emphasized strength, other than that, he also paid attention to identity, birth, and background. For a direct disciple of a saint like Guang Qingzi, as long as the Taoist priests who cultivated the same Tao as him were not crazy, they would definitely not stop him from attaining the Tao. Otherwise, how could the primordial Lord of Heaven let them go? Even if they escaped to the chaos outside the sky, they would be found by the primordial Lord of Heaven and refined to death. No, perhaps it was more terrifying than death. Just like that, Guang Qingzi easily completed the battle of the great Taos and imprinted his real spirit mark on the Tao that he cultivated, even though the other Tao masters had gone easy on him. Rumble. The moment Guang Qingzi completed this step, the sky suddenly shook. Then, A long river with no end or source and a width of tens of thousands of miles came across the sky and stretched between heaven and earth. That was the River of Destiny. Once Guangchengzi transcended the River of Destiny, he could complete his Tao fruit and truly become an immortal Daluo Taoist priest. It was not difficult to transcend the River of Destiny. He only needed to find the light spot that represented his destiny in the endless River of Destiny. This was not difficult for a Khanate god-fiend like Guangchengzi. This was because the destiny of a Khanate god-fiend was not in the River of Destiny. Instead, it was suspended in mid-air like a star, blooming with bright light. It was very attractive and eye-catching. Therefore, Guangchengzi easily found his destiny. This was the reason why Khanate god-fiends were said to be destined to become Taoist priests. The destiny of a Khanate god-fiend floated in mid-air and could break through the void at any time. This meant that it was easier for them to transcend destiny than the masses. Whoosh! In the River of Destiny, a dazzling star rose slowly and then completely disappeared. This was the sign of transcending destiny. Guangchengzi had become a Taoist priest. Rumble! The world shook inexplicably. Strange phenomena of flowers falling from the sky and golden lotuses emerging from the earth appeared in a radius of millions of miles. This was the heaven and earth congratulating the birth of a Taoist priest. Guangchengzi's confirmation of his Tao was exceptionally smooth. It was almost done in one go and he achieved the level of Daluo Taoist priests without encountering any obstacles. His negative karma had long been washed away by the primordial Lord of Heaven's merits. The resentment from the Khanate Daos also vanished completely with the rebirth of the three realms. Thank you, Master. After confirming his Tao, Guangchengzi came back to his senses. First, he was respectful to the primordial Lord of Heaven, then he bowed to Feng Zichen. Thank you, Master, for teaching me and helping me reopen the door of Tao. In the future, if Master has any errands, as long as it's not an enemy of the sect, Guangchengzi will do it even if it means risking my life to repay Master's kindness today. The favor of achieving Tao was as great as the heavens. This time, Guangchengzi listened to Feng Zichen's preaching of Tao and confirmed his Tao, which meant that he owed Feng Zichen a great deal of karma. Therefore, he made such a promise. As long as it was not an enemy of the sect, Guangchengzi would definitely risk his life to complete Feng Zichen's instructions in order to understand karma. In response, Feng Zichen only smiled and did not say anything. In fact, he would not say anything in front of the primordial Lord of Heaven. Even if he had something to instruct Guangchengzi, he could not do it in front of the primordial Lord of Heaven. Just like that, after waiting for another few hundred years, all the cultivators present woke up. Unfortunately, other than Guangchengzi, no one else had successfully confirmed their Tao. However, there were many disciples of the Jie school and Chan school who were about to confirm their Tao. It would not be long before there would be dozens of Taoist priests in the world. Feng Zichen was very satisfied with this. So what if they were disciples of the two schools? After becoming Daluo Taoist priests, wouldn't they still have to work for him? These were all Feng Zichen's future subordinates. The stronger they were, the happier Feng Zichen would be. Since everyone had woken up, the preaching could be announced as the end. Then, Feng Zichen waved his hand and sent everyone away. The Taoist ancestors' preaching ended after 3 times. That was because those who listened to the Taoist ancestors' preaching were all Daluo Taoist priests. Moreover, the Taoist ancestors' preaching was the truth of heaven and earth. It was the path after Daluo Jingxian. Therefore, the preaching was divided into 3 times to give the Taoist priests time to digest the knowledge. However, Feng Zichen's preaching was different. First, he did not preach the truth of heaven and earth. Second, he did not preach the cultivation method after the Khanate Taoist priests. He only taught the world 3 methods to become Taoist priests. In this way, there was no need to preach 3 times. He could finish it in 1 time. As for the cultivation method after Daluo Jingxian, it was easy for the living beings of the 3 realms to know because there was still one person who had not preached. Who? Great Emperor Ziwei. The 8 saints and the 2 primordial chaos had each preached once. But there was still no movement from Great Emperor Ziwei. This would not do. Everyone had preached, but he was the only one who had not. This was obviously inappropriate. Great Emperor Ziwei was duty-bound to preach the great Tao to the living beings of the three realms. However, what should he preach? Everyone had already preached what needed to be preached. If Great Emperor Ziwei did not come up with something new, he would inevitably be suspected of picking up the wisdom of others. Moreover, if he did not make it special, how could he show that Great Emperor Ziwei was different from others? With a thought, Great Emperor Ziwei had an idea. He would not preach the great Tao anymore. He would discuss the great Tao with everyone and let the living beings of the three realms listen in. This was much more interesting than preaching the great Tao. Thinking of this, Great Emperor Ziwei coughed lightly and said to the saints and the many great mediums who had not left under the Tree of World, "It's rare that all of you are here. I have a request. I wonder if all of you will do me the honor?" Hearing this, everyone did not immediately agree. Instead, Saint Tai Ching asked, "What request does the emperor have? Why don't you tell us? If we can do it, Poor Wei and the others will definitely do their best to help." Standing up from the platform, Great Emperor Ziwei said in a clear voice, "I see that all of you have reached the limit of sage-to-be, but you have not been able to take that crucial step. I have a feeling in my heart, so I decided to reopen the sky of the Daluo and invite all of you to come and discuss the great Tao and take a look at the mystery of the primordial chaos realm. What do you think, fellow Taoists? The sky of the Daluo, the highest sky of the primordial chaos, was also the primordial chaos Tao domain. It was also the legendary number 1 sacred ground of the primordial chaos. That's right. The number 1 sacred ground of the primordial chaos was not Tao ancestor Hongjuan's purple cloud palace, but the supreme sky of the Daluo that was located at the highest point of the boundless starry sky. Here, the origin of heaven and earth gathered, and the innate Tao interweaved like a net that contained all the truths of heaven and earth and endless mysteries. It was the source of the great Tao, the origin of heaven and earth. Here, one could see all the mysteries of the great Tao. This was the Daluo Jingxian, the highest sky, the supreme Tao domain. The Daluo sky was located in the middle of the sky, which was right above Mount Buzhou in the past, and right above the World Tree today. It was the same as the Ziwei star, 2 sides of the same body, in the same place but in different voids. Although this alone could show that the Daluo sky was extraordinary, it was not enough to let it surpass the World Tree and the Purple Cloud Palace to become the number 1 sacred ground of the primordial chaos. The real reason why the Daluo sky became the number 1 sacred ground of the primordial chaos was that there were 3,000 Daluo Taoist priests living in the Daluo sky. 3,000 Taoist priests living in the same place. If this could not be considered the number 1 sacred ground of the primordial chaos, where else could be called the number 1 sacred ground of the primordial chaos? 3,000 Taoist priests gathered in one place. The energy required for daily cultivation was definitely unimaginable. If it was converted into innate spiritual treasures, the energy they needed to cultivate for a year was equivalent to an innate spiritual treasure. Even a Tao ancestor could not afford to consume an innate spiritual treasure a year, but the Daluo sky could. Therefore, it was the number 1 sacred ground of the primordial chaos. As for where the 3,000 Taoist priests came from, they naturally came from the primordial chaos. In the ancient primordial chaos, there were many Taoist priests in the world, other than the shamans and demons. Most of these Taoist priests lived in seclusion on the ground and cultivated silently. However, in the early ancient times, Emperor Xuanxu cut off the connection between heaven and earth, making it difficult for the primordial chaos to support the Daluo Taoist priests. For this reason, some Taoist priests had to leave their homes and move away from the primordial chaos. Coincidentally, the Daluo sky appeared at this time, and Great Emperor Ziwei invited Taoist priests to live in the Daluo sky. At the same time, the heavenly Tao also secretly used its power to tell the Taoist priests that there was an opportunity to attain the Tao in the Daluo sky. However, it was easy to enter the Daluo sky, but difficult to leave the Daluo sky. The Daluo sky was known as the cultivation place prepared by the heavenly Tao for the Taoist priests, but in fact it was a place for them to live in seclusion. Once they entered the Daluo sky, they had to cut off the mortal world and no longer interfere in the matters of the primordial chaos. They had to focus on the Tao. This was a good thing and a bad thing. The bad thing was that they could not interfere in the primordial chaos. Fortunately, they had nothing to do with the tribulation from then on. Tribulation could not enter the Daluo sky. No tribulation could enter the Daluo sky, including the immeasurable tribulation. The purpose of the Daluo sky's existence was to create a new world. When the immeasurable tribulation descended, everything would be destroyed and everything would return to chaos. Only the Daluo sky would exist. At this time, the saints and the many primordial chaos Dao masters would use the Daluo sky as the foundation to create a new world in the chaos and establish the earth, fire, water, and wind. The Daluo sky was the embryonic form of the eternal world, and it was also the place where Pangu confirmed his Dao. If one day Pangu succeeded in confirming his Dao and the Dao fruit of the great Dao was born, he would definitely be born in the Daluo sky. At the same time, the Daluo sky would also transform into an eternal and indestructible sky that could not be destroyed even by the immeasurable tribulation. The Daluo sky was very extraordinary. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was the number one sacred ground. Khanate godfiends were born because of the Dao. They followed the Dao and pursued the Dao all their lives. Therefore, there was no lack of people in this group who were dedicated to pursuing the Dao. What such people lacked the most was a suitable place to live in seclusion. The appearance of the Daluo sky just happened to fill this gap. After learning the meaning of the Daluo sky's existence, a portion of the Khanate Taoist priests walked into the Daluo sky almost without hesitation. From then on, they escaped and isolated themselves from the world. There were a total of 3,000 such Taoist priests. They were the 3,000 Taoist priests in the Daluo sky. Ever since they entered the Daluo sky, none of them had left this place. Although they had never left the Daluo sky, their lives were not considered poor. There was no lack of Khanate spiritual roots in the Daluo sky. Chapter 839. These Daluo Taoist priests lived in the Daluo sky. In their free time, they could taste innate spiritual treasures and refine pills to pass the time. They could also sit and discuss the Tao with their fellow Taoists. Even worse, they could swim in the sea of the Great Path. Their lives were much more carefree than those of the Taoist priests in the outside world. However, the Daluo sky had indeed been closed for a long time. It was time to absorb some fresh blood and recruit some new members. At the same time, they could also communicate with the Taoist priests in the outside world and experience the changes in the world in recent years. It was not advisable to build a cart behind closed doors. Therefore, taking advantage of this rare opportunity, Great Emperor Ziwei intended to reopen the Daluo sky to accept new members and new knowledge. Is the Emperor planning to reopen the Daluo sky? Speaking of which, in ancient times, many of the poor Wei's friends entered the Daluo sky. After that, they completely lost contact with each other. It's been a while since we last met. If the Emperor reopens the Daluo sky, the poor Wei will definitely go there. Even if we don't gain anything from the discussion, it's still good to see some old friends. Not long after Great Emperor Ziwei finished speaking, a great medium immediately spoke up. The 3,000 Taoist priests naturally had many old friends. Many of the great medium present had good friends and even their juniors who entered the Daluo sky. Since then, they had lost contact with each other. Now that the Daluo sky had reopened, they could use this opportunity to meet their old friends. This was the mentality of a small number of great medium, but the majority of them had much more realistic thoughts. They had no old friends in the Daluo sky, but they still wanted to go there. Their purpose was to discuss the Tao with the Taoist priests in the Daluo sky. The 3,000 Taoist priests had been in seclusion in the Daluo sky for tens of millions of years. They must have gained a lot. If he could have a discussion with them, he might be able to gain some enlightenment and speed up his promotion to primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. Discussion of the Tao, the Emperor said it very well. If we can discuss the Tao with the fellow Taoists in the Daluo sky, I think the poor Wei and the others will gain a lot of enlightenment. A powerful cultivator said. Regardless of whether or not the sages were going to attend the Daluo's heavenly Tao discourse, these great divine ability masters were going. Not long after, All the great mediums expressed their opinions and agreed to head to the Daluo to discuss the Tao. At this moment, all the great mediums turned their gazes to the saints sitting at the head of the table. Now, they were the only ones who had not expressed their opinions. Should they go or not? Everyone had gone. If they did not go, it would be somewhat inappropriate. Therefore, the sages thought about it and were about to agree. The Grand Pure One smiled and said, "Since all the fellow Taoists are going, the Poor Way and the others will naturally go together. Let's make use of this opportunity to gather and discuss the Tao." Ever since Master's Tao lecture ended, we rarely discussed the Tao. We also rarely walked around. Our relationship is also a little distant. This is a rare opportunity. We can walk around more and build a relationship again. We can rekindle our friendship as fellow disciples. Hearing that, everyone laughed. They first complained to each other and then planned to agree on a time to gather a few more times. There were even people who told the Grand Pure One not to be stingy and take out the 9 Revolutions golden pill to entertain everyone. In an instant, the scene became incomparably lively. After a while, when the conversation gradually stopped, Tao Ancestor Hong Jun, who had been ignored by everyone, suddenly spoke and attracted everyone's attention. If all of you go to the Daluo to discuss the Tao, this Tao discussion will definitely become a grand event in the primordial world. Therefore, in the opinion of the Poor Way, we should either not do it or do it on a large scale. Since we want to discuss the Tao, we can't limit it to everyone here. The primordial world is huge and there are countless experts. In the opinion of the Poor Way, all the Taoist priests in the primordial world should participate in the Daluo Tao discussion this time. We will definitely make this Tao discussion an unprecedented grand event in the primordial world. That's not all. Under the Khanate Taoist priests, the endless living beings of the 3 realms can come to the Daluo heaven to listen if they are fated and seek the opportunity to verify the Tao. After Tao Ancestor Hong Jun finished speaking, everyone praised him and said, "All right, Master Teacher is right." The Tao Ancestor spoke. These great mystical abilities were all his disciples. How could they openly object to him? Naturally, they would do whatever he said. Moreover, everyone thought carefully about what the Tao Ancestor said and realized that it was a good thing. There were benefits and no harm. In that case, everyone had no reason to object. When everyone discussed the Tao and their wisdom collided, countless sparks of inspiration would be produced. When that time came, the cultivation civilization of the 3 realms would definitely achieve unprecedented development and evolve rapidly. After obtaining everyone's approval, Tao Ancestor Hong Jun did not say anything. He only looked at Great Emperor Ziwei. After all, the Daluo heaven was his territory. Although Tao Ancestor Hong Jun's suggestion was good, it had to be approved by him. Otherwise, no matter how much Tao Ancestor Hong Jun said, it would be useless. Great Emperor Ziwei had no intention of rejecting Tao Ancestor Hong Jun's suggestion at all. This was because what Tao Ancestor Hong Jun said was exactly what he thought. Even if the Tao Ancestor did not say it, he would have mentioned it later. However, although Tao Ancestor Hong Jun's words were the same as Great Emperor Ziwei's, he did not say much. Perhaps this was done on purpose by Tao Ancestor Hong Jun so that Great Emperor Ziwei could add on and set the rules for this matter. However, whether or not Tao Ancestor Hong Jun did it on purpose, Great Emperor Ziwei still had to add on the last point. As he stood up, he heard Great Emperor Ziwei say, "Tao Ancestor's words are the same as Great Emperor Ziwei's thoughts. Ziwei has no reason to refuse." However, other than that, Ziwei also has a small suggestion to make. That is, if the results of this discussion are good, why don't we set this matter as a tradition? Every 1,000,000 years we will discuss the Tao in the Daluo heaven. What do you think, fellow Taoists? Without waiting for everyone to reply, Tao Ancestor Hong Jun clapped his hands and praised. Ziwei's suggestion is exactly what I want. In the Poor Way's opinion, the discussion of the Tao should indeed be a tradition. In this way, you can use this to build relationships and also benefit from the discussion of the Tao. It can also benefit the living beings of the 3 realms. It is indeed a good thing to kill many birds with one stone. Tao Ancestor Hong Jun and Great Emperor Ziwei, the two biggest giants of the untainted world, had agreed to this matter. What else could the others say? Of course, they nodded in agreement. Moreover, this matter was indeed a good thing. Not only would it not affect their interests, but it would also benefit them. Therefore, in their hearts, they were also very much in favor of Great Emperor Ziwei facilitating this matter. Seeing that everyone had agreed, Great Emperor Ziwei could not help but nod and say, "Since all of you have no objections, then this matter is settled. The following matters will be left to Ziwei to arrange. Fellow Taoists, just wait for my notice." Everyone nodded and said, "We will listen to the Imperial Emperor's arrangements." Since things had come to this, the crowd dispersed. After hurriedly bidding farewell to the few people he was familiar with, Great Emperor Ziwei hurriedly returned to the boundless starry sky to prepare for the opening of the Daluo heaven and the discussion of the Tao. After returning to the boundless starry sky, the first thing Great Emperor Ziwei did was to remove the restrictions of the boundless starry sky and no longer restrict outsiders from entering the boundless starry sky. However, although the restrictions were lifted, the necessary surveillance would still not be reduced. The galactic cosmic light array quietly changed and gradually turned into a mirror that reflected everything in the boundless starry sky. Everything that happened in the boundless starry sky would be reflected and recorded by this mirror. No matter who entered the boundless starry sky, they would not be able to hide from this mirror. Everything they did and said would be recorded. Under this mirror, even if the primordial chaos Daluo Jinxian came, if he did not have the intention to hide, he would also be exposed by this mirror. It could be said that as long as Feng Zichen wanted, in the boundless starry sky, no one else had any privacy to speak of other than him. If one was not used to it, they could just leave the boundless starry sky. No one was forcing them to come. This mirror was the Xianxia version of an omnidirectional camera with no blind spots. In addition to the mirror, in the boundless starry sky, teams of powerful heavenly soldiers appeared. They rode on star beasts and formed teams of 10,000 people. They guarded the various exits of the boundless starry sky to prevent outsiders from entering. These heavenly soldiers were all direct subordinates of Great Emperor Ziwei. Their cultivation levels were abnormally powerful. Ordinary heavenly soldiers had the cultivation level of Lord of Tai. The divine general in the lead was even at the level of half-step Taoist priests. The heavenly soldiers in the boundless starry sky were used by Great Emperor Ziwei to compete with the elites of the demon race in the past. Naturally, they were incomparably powerful. As for how these heavenly soldiers were selected, it was not complicated. Among them, there were innate life forms born in the boundless starry sky. They were found by Great Emperor Ziwei's subordinates and brought into the Ziwei Heavenly Palace to cultivate. Those who performed well were selected as heavenly soldiers. In addition to the innate life forms born in the boundless starry sky, these heavenly soldiers were mostly from the innate races that had pledged allegiance to Great Emperor Ziwei. Great Emperor Ziwei was the top and most honorable great medium in the Eldritch world. He had also once served as the Celestial Emperor. Naturally, he attracted the allegiance of many races. For example, the Heavenly Fox clan of Greenhill Mountain, the powerful giant Longbow clan, the Void clan born in the Void, the Jade clan born from the innate White Jade, the Ice clan born from the innate Cold Ice, and so on. These races either had extraordinary talents or extraordinary backgrounds. In short, those who were chosen by Great Emperor Ziwei had to have outstanding qualities. In some aspects, they were far superior to other innate races. They had the highest innate bloodline, second only to the innate gods and demons. Otherwise, they would not have been chosen by Great Emperor Ziwei. As the restrictions of the boundless starry sky came into contact, the beings of the three realms quickly discovered that the boundless starry sky seemed to be different from before. The most obvious change was that the stars that filled the starry sky seemed to be much brighter than before. After that, many cultivators who cultivated the cultivation techniques of the lineage of stars felt that the circulation of the cultivation techniques in their bodies was much faster than before. At the same time, some immortals with powerful cultivation bases felt that the barrier between them and the boundless starry sky seemed to have disappeared. The boundless starry sky that they could not come into contact with in the past was now completely accessible to them by following the guidance of the starlight if they wanted to. What was going on? Why was the boundless starry sky suddenly perceived by others and allowed them to enter it? Could it be that the legendary great Emperor Ziwei had released the restrictions of the boundless starry sky? While the beings were puzzled, some of the bolder ones had already followed the guidance of the starlight and headed towards the boundless starry sky to catch a glimpse of the starry sky. Seeing this, the beings were confused. They did not know if they should follow them into the boundless starry sky. One had to know that it was the boundless starry sky. Ever since the Great Witch Demon War, the boundless starry sky had been completely sealed off. Other than the subordinates of Great Emperor Ziwei, no one else entered the boundless starry sky. Counting the time, it had been tens of millions of years since a living person stepped into the boundless starry sky. Over time, the boundless starry sky became the epitome of mystery in the eyes of the people of the world. It contained countless fortunes and opportunities that could allow one to reach the heavens in a single bound. In the boundless starry sky, there was even a supreme fruit of the way that could allow one to directly become a Taoist priest after eating it. This was the understanding of the people of the world of the boundless starry sky. The more mysterious it was, the more it attracted people's imagination. Then, as word of mouth spread, it became more and more exaggerated and gradually deviated from the truth. There was even talk about countless fortunes and a supreme fruit of the way that could allow one to directly become a Taoist priest. It was really funny. If Great Emperor Ziwei heard this, he would probably laugh nonstop. The people of the world were still too ignorant to believe such exaggerated rumors. However, things were just that ridiculous. Although the rumors were exaggerated, they were basically true. That's right, they guessed correctly. The boundless starry sky had all these things. In fact, the true boundless starry sky was even more exaggerated than the rumors. The boundless starry sky could be said to be full of opportunities. No matter where one was, as long as one was in the boundless starry sky, as long as one looked up, one could see large amounts of innate starlight intertwining, giving birth to pure innate star essence that floated freely in the starry sky. If one was lucky, one could probably pick up a galaxy divine gold after taking a few steps. If one was even luckier, it was not rare to occasionally come across a few drops of triple brilliance divine water. In short, the origin of the boundless starry sky was too rich. With the support of the god Pangu, even Great Emperor Ziwei, who ruled the entire boundless starry sky, could not say for sure how many treasures were nurtured in it. As for the supreme fruit of the way that could allow one to directly become a Daluo Taoist priest, it also existed in the boundless starry sky. Zhouxing intertwined with each other, and some of the origin would often dissipate and intertwine with the Tao of heaven and earth. Over time, many mysterious things were born. There were innate life forms, innate spiritual treasures, and innate god fiends. If by chance 365 qi of Zhouxing's origin would gather in one place at the same time and combine with the innate Tao, it would give birth to a supreme fruit of the way that could allow one to directly become a Taoist priest. This was a true treasure of heaven and earth, rarer than supreme-grade innate spiritual treasures and far more valuable than innate god fiends. It was also one of the most precious treasures in the boundless starry sky, one that could only be found by chance. Since Great Emperor Ziwei ruled the boundless starry sky, only 3 supreme fruits of the way had been born in the boundless starry sky. As for the time when Di Jun ruled the boundless starry sky, not a single one had been born. Chapter 840. Just as the people of the 3 realms were guessing what had happened in the boundless starry sky, Ziwei the Great slowly opened his eyes in the Ziwei Temple. I, Pangu's Ziwei clan, consider that it is difficult for all living beings to seek the Tao and see the Great Path. Therefore, I have decided to reopen the Daluo sky in 100,000 years and invite the Taoist priests of the 3 realms to come here and discuss the Tao in order to seek the fruit of the origin. All living beings of the 3 realms, if they are fated, can come to the Daluo sky to listen. His voice was loud and resonated with the Tao. It rang in the ears of all living beings between heaven and earth, both inside and outside the 3 realms. The voice rang 3 times in a row before it stopped. In the next moment, the great masters who were hidden outside of time and space, in the chaos beyond the heavens, or in some secret realms, were all alarmed by this voice. The faces that had remained the same for thousands of years finally showed a trace of movement. They opened their eyes that had not changed for thousands of years and looked in the direction of the boundless starry sky in surprise and bewilderment. The Daluo sky? After tens of millions of years, is the Daluo sky finally going to open? Last time, the poor Wei had something to do and missed the Daluo sky. This time, we can't miss it. We can go and see how the Daluo sky is different from the outside world and how it can surpass Master's Purple Cloud Palace and become the #1 holy land of the untainted land. 100,000 years later, the poor Wei will go and meet some old friends. These great masters who had been living in seclusion finally changed their minds after countless years. They planned to come out of their seclusion and go to the Daluo sky to discuss the Tao. The #1 holy land could not attract people, but the hope of attaining the Tao was. The reason why the great masters lived in seclusion was that they did not want to be tainted by the mortal world and only wanted to pursue the Tao. However, the Daluo sky's discussion of the Tao contained a trace of a chance of attaining the Tao. Therefore, even these great masters who had been living in seclusion could not help but think about leaving their seclusion after hearing this news. Those great mediums were excited, not to mention the other Taoist priests. Numerous Taoist priests that were usually nowhere to be seen suddenly appeared and walked through the 3 dimensions. They browsed through the magnificent mountains and rivers as they searched for friends and the Tao, and they waited for the arrival of the agreement of 100,000 years. The great mystical powers and the Xiantian Taoist priests were very excited, but the beings of the 3 realms were at a loss. They knew what the Tao debate meant, but they had no idea where the Daluo sky was. There was a place called the Daluo sky in the 3 realms. Among the 36 heavens of the heaven realm, he had never heard of a heaven called the Daluo heaven. This question lingered in everyone's mind for thousands of years before they finally got an answer from a Tao master. The so-called Daluo sky was actually the #1 sacred ground of legend. It was situated at the peak of the 3 dimensions, and it was the place where a myriad of Taoists converged. When the people heard this, they were all indescribably shocked. Although they had never been to the Daluo sky, from its ranking as the #1 sacred ground of the primordial world, they knew that this was definitely a supreme place. For a moment, all the beings of the 3 realms were extremely excited as they flew towards the boundless starry sky. They were not great mystical powers, nor were they Xiantian Taoist priests. With a thought, they could rush to the boundless starry sky. They were just ordinary immortals. The boundless starry sky was abnormally far away from the mortal world. With their speed, it would probably take them thousands of years just to travel. Most likely, they would have to spend more than half of the 100,000 years on the road. Therefore, the beings of the 3 realms naturally had to rush to the boundless starry sky in advance. Firstly, they would probably miss the Tao debate. Secondly, the boundless starry sky was mysterious and contained countless opportunities. If they arrived in advance and traveled in the boundless starry sky for a period of time, they might be able to obtain some opportunities. Yes, that was a good idea. There was a layer of thunder, fire, meteorites, and astral winds at the border of heaven and earth. Without the cultivation of Taijingxian, it was impossible to enter the heaven realm. The boundless starry sky was still above the heaven realm. If they wanted to reach the boundless starry sky, they had to go above the 36 heavens and cross the 36 spatial barriers. Therefore, although there were many immortals in the 3 realms, there were very few below the Xiantian Taoist priests who could make it here. Even Lord Tai might be able to walk into the boundless starry sky without the protection of an innate spiritual treasure, but he would definitely not be able to get close to the Daluo sky. The phrase fated person had already eliminated more than half of the beings of the 3 realms. While the beings of the 3 realms and the Taoist priests were busy, Great Emperor Ziwei, who was in the boundless starry sky, was not idle either. At this moment, he was in seclusion, preparing to plan a major event. In the place where Great Emperor Ziwei was cultivating in seclusion, the brilliance of the 365 heavenly cycle main stars and billions of other stars gathered in one place. In front of Great Emperor Ziwei, a figure that looked exactly like him was gradually formed. That's right, Great Emperor Ziwei was using the power of the boundless starry sky to condense an incarnation that was exactly the same as himself. The reason why the preaching was set to be 100,000 years later was to give everyone time to prepare, but in reality, it was to buy time for Great Emperor Ziwei to condense an incarnation. The incarnation that Great Emperor Ziwei condensed this time was extraordinary. It bore an unprecedented responsibility, and it was his substitute. He was going to discuss the Tao on behalf of his original body in the Daluo Sky Discourse with Tao ancestor Hongjun, the various saints, and the numerous great mediums and Taoist priests. It was extremely difficult to not be seen by others when he was in front of so many people and had a friendly conversation with them. Therefore, Feng Zichen thought for a long time before he decided to condense an incarnation as Great Emperor Ziwei. His human identity was not acceptable, his Luai's identity was not acceptable, and his Shenqing identity was even more unacceptable. Once he condensed an incarnation with these three identities, he would probably be seen through as soon as he arrived in the Daluo sky. What Feng Zichen wanted to plan was extremely secretive, and it was even more disadvantageous to the Shen sect. It was something that could not be known by the great mediums of the Shen sect. Otherwise, it would definitely cause a lot of trouble. Therefore, after thinking about it, Feng Zichen decided to let Great Emperor Ziwei handle this matter. This was because only Great Emperor Ziwei's incarnation could hide from the eyes of everyone, the saints, and even Tao ancestor Hongjun. Firstly, Great Emperor Ziwei was the master of the Daluo sky. Secondly, the Daluo sky was located in the boundless starry sky. Thirdly, Great Emperor Ziwei's strength was the strongest. With all these conditions added together, as long as Great Emperor Ziwei's incarnation was condensed perfectly, with the support of the Daluo sky and the boundless starry sky, it could definitely be passed off as the real thing and deceive everyone's perception. Time passed by minute by minute. 100,000 years passed in the blink of an eye. Soon, the date of the sparring session was approaching. Many great mediums had already set off for the Daluo sky. At this moment, in front of Great Emperor Ziwei, a figure that looked exactly like him stood majestically. Starlight surged around his body, transforming into galaxies that wrapped around him, exuding an unparalleled divine might. Great Emperor Ziwei stared at him for a while and couldn't help but nod his head in satisfaction. In order to refine this incarnation, not only did he spend 100,000 years, but he also used up all the millions of innate star sources that he had accumulated. Fortunately, after spending so many resources, the result was undoubtedly gratifying. Not only did this incarnation look exactly like Great Emperor Ziwei, but it could also erupt with the power of his peak. Although it couldn't last for long, it was definitely no problem for it to last for decades. It was a perfect incarnation. After looking at this incarnation again, Great Emperor Ziwei nodded his head in satisfaction. Immediately, he took off the heavenly cycle-starry robe on his body and draped it over the incarnation. At the same time, he also took off the myriad star crown on his head and placed it on the head of the incarnation. With this, a new Great Emperor Ziwei was born. Greetings, Great Emperor Ziwei. At this moment, the incarnation opened his eyes and bowed to Great Emperor Ziwei. Great Emperor Ziwei didn't return the greeting. He continued to stare at the incarnation. He always felt that something was missing, causing this incarnation to be imperfect. Finally, Great Emperor Ziwei seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly took out the Zhouxing painting and placed it in the hands of the incarnation. With this, everything was perfect. Now, anyone who came would think that this was the real Great Emperor Ziwei and not some incarnation. Seeing that there were no more mistakes, Great Emperor Ziwei immediately ordered, "My fellow Taoists are almost here. I'll have to trouble you to entertain them." The incarnation returned the greeting and said, "Great Emperor Ziwei is too polite. You and I are one. There's no need to trouble me." After saying this, the incarnation's figure gradually faded away. He had gone to the Daluo sky to prepare for the opening of the Daluo sky. After the incarnation was far away, Feng Zichen, who was dressed in plain clothes, flipped his palm and took out a small purple Dao bell. This was Feng Zichen's foundation in this world, the most powerful innate supreme treasure of the untainted land, the Hongmeng Daozhong. At this moment, Many of his treasures had left his body. Feng Zichen finally used the Hongmeng Daozhong again. Ever since he became a primordial chaos cultivator, Feng Zichen rarely used the Hongmeng Daozhong. Even if he did use it, he mostly used it in the Realm Sea. He rarely used this treasure in the Untainted Land. Haha, old friend. It's time for us to fight side by side again. With a hearty laugh, Feng Zichen shook the Hongmeng Daozhong and shook open the void in front of him. He entered and disappeared. At the same time, countless traces of the great Tao appeared at the highest point of the boundless starry sky. They turned into a vast torrent that gathered together and slowly pulled apart. Whoosh! In an instant, endless Tao light rose, covering the radiance of the stars and dimming the sun and moon. It illuminated the entire three realms, the universe, and the endless spacetime. In the Tao light, a corner of a world formed entirely of great Tao rules gradually revealed itself, emitting endless Tao rhythms. The Daluo sky. The highest heaven of the Untainted Land had opened. At this moment, many Taoist priests, great masters, and even saints of the Untainted Land seemed to have received some kind of signal and set off for the Daluo sky. Then, the creatures of the three realms saw a scene that they would never forget in their lives. Rumble. One after another, brilliant great Taos rose from all over the three realms. They were mysterious and unfathomable. The Tao rhythms flowed as they pierced through the 9 layers of clouds and entered the Daluo sky. Every great Tao here represented a Khanate Taoist priest. They were the appearance of Tao, the manifestation of Tao, and the incarnation of Tao. As more and more great Tao rules rose, the entire three realms was gradually enveloped by a mighty Tao aura. It suppressed the beings of the three realms to the point that they could not raise their heads and did not dare to look directly at the Daluo sky. At a certain moment, a blurry figure suddenly flashed in the great Tao rules. These were the Khanate Taoist priests who had already set off for the Daluo sky. At the same time, the incarnation of great Emperor Ziwei had already stood together with the 3,000 Taoist priests in the Daluo sky to welcome the arrival of the people who were discussing Tao. Compared to the Taoist priests in the outside world, it was obvious that the Taoist priests in the Daluo sky were more excited. Not only were they excited because they were about to see old friends, but they were also excited because they were about to see the great Tao. The Daluo sky had been cultivating in seclusion for countless years. They already understood each other's Tao very well and urgently needed new knowledge to supplement it. And these Daluo Taoist priests who came to discuss Tao carried the new Tao and principles that they urgently needed. And these things would bring them one step closer to the primordial chaos realm. So, how could they not be excited? Not long after, several Khanate Taoist priests came together. As the disciple of great Emperor Ziwei, Buzhou hurriedly went forward to welcome them and invited them from the boundless starry sky to the Daluo sky. When they arrived here, great Emperor Ziwei and the others were naturally in charge of receiving them. After these few Taoist priests, the Khanate Taoist priests of the primordial chaos arrived one after another. Sometimes there were even dozens of them rushing together. They were all Khanate Taoist priests. Their realms were about the same, so their speed was naturally about the same. Since they had set off together, they naturally arrived at about the same time. It was not surprising that they arrived together. In just a few hours, most of the Taoist priests of the primordial chaos had arrived. Only the people from the major factions were not here. Just as he thought this, he saw great Emperor Gaochen, the 3 sovereigns, and 5 emperors leading a group of Taoist priests of the human race appeared in the boundless starry sky. Behind them, Goddess Hutu led the great shaman of the shaman race, Donghuang Tai led the demon god of the demon race, and Patriarch Kunping led the demon god of the North Sea. They rushed over from 3 different directions. After these 3 factions were led into the Daluo sky, a 5-colored light suddenly rose from the horizon. It was the arrival of the 3 Khanate races. At this point, most of the major factions of the primordial chaos had arrived. Only the saints had not arrived. Boom! As soon as the 3 Khanate races sat down, a huge wave of saint aura suddenly descended. Everyone looked up and saw the 6 saints bringing their disciples over. When everyone saw this, they hurriedly went forward to welcome them. When the saints sat down, Everyone thought that the preaching was about to begin. Unexpectedly, as the owner of this place, Great Emperor Ziwei suddenly stood up and went out to welcome them. When everyone saw this, they hurriedly followed. Although they did not know who the newcomers were, they were definitely important figures since Great Emperor Ziwei went out to welcome them. As soon as they left the Daluo sky, everyone felt that something was different. They saw that the 5 elements qi between heaven and earth suddenly became abnormally active. Vaguely, they could hear the roars of dragons, phoenixes, tigers, cheilants, and black tortoises. Seeing this phenomenon, everyone had a feeling and roughly guessed who the newcomers were. As expected, at the end of the world, 5 colored auspicious clouds shrouded the boundless sky. They transformed into the shape of the 5 elements sacred beasts and constantly approached the Daluo sky. The 5 elements sacred beasts were here, looking at the 5 supreme gods in gorgeous robes in front of them. Everyone, including the saints, hurriedly went forward and bowed. Greetings, supremacies. The 5 elements sacred beasts also smiled and returned the greeting. Greetings, fellow Taoists. Chapter 841. After greeting everyone, the 5 elements sacred beasts did not walk into the Daluo sky. Instead, they stood still as if they were waiting for someone. Great Emperor Ziwei was also puzzled by this. Who else was coming? Why did the 5 elements sacred beasts have to wait outside the door personally? Dao ancestor Hongjun? Obviously not. With the relationship between the 5 elements sacred beasts and Dao ancestor Hongjun, it was already very fortunate that they could meet in harmony without bickering or fighting. It was impossible for them to wait outside for Dao ancestor Hongjun. Curious, Great Emperor Ziwei decided to stay behind. He wanted to meet the person who was worthy of the 5 elements sacred beast's personal weight. In fact, Great Emperor Ziwei and everyone else had already guessed who the person was. It was most likely the most ancient great medium who did not appear in front of others. After the war between the 3 clans, the group of most ancient innate saints had collectively disappeared. No trace of them could be found between heaven and earth. It was as if they had left the primordial world. In fact, that was not the case. They had always been hiding in the primordial world and had long achieved the Tao fruit of the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. It was just that no one knew about them. Now, looking at the 5 elements sacred beasts, it was likely that the Daluo sky's discussion of the Tao had attracted their attention. They wanted to come here to discuss the Tao with everyone. It was certain that the most ancient great beings were powerful, but as for how powerful they were, among the great medium here, only great ancestor Kuanping and a few others had come into contact with them. The other great medium had only heard of them but had never really seen them, so they had no way of knowing. Therefore, everyone was looking forward to the great medium who was about to arrive. Just like that, everyone waited expectantly. They did not have to wait for long. After a while, they saw 9 figures surrounded by Dao Qi walking over from the boundary between the chaos and the boundless starry sky. Everyone went forward to take a look. Who else could it be but Dao ancestor Hongjun? As for the other 8 people, sorry, no one present knew them. Greetings, Dao ancestor. Everyone went forward and bowed to Dao ancestor Hongjun. After that, everyone bowed to the 8 people who were traveling with the Dao ancestor. Greetings, seniors. Although they did not know them, it was always right to call them seniors. Greetings, fellow Taoists. The 8 of them returned the greeting. Fellow Taoists, you're finally here. Come, let's go in quickly. Fellow Taoists have been waiting for a long time. At this moment, the 5 elements sacred beast stepped forward and pulled the 8 people into the Daluo sky. During this period, the 5 elements sacred beast acted as if he did not see Dao ancestor Hongjun. He did not go forward to greet him. When he spoke to the 8 people, it was as if he did not exist. Seeing this scene, Dao ancestor Hongjun was not angry. He only pointed at the 5 elements sacred beasts and said to the fellow Taoists beside him, "Look at how stingy they are." As they chatted and laughed, everyone entered the Daluo sky, indicating that the Daluo heavenly discourse was about to begin. A total of 10,000 Xiantian Taoist priests, 3,000 almighty experts, over 20 primordial chaos Dalio Jinxian, and 1 Wuji Dalio Jinxian came to the meeting. Since the birth of the primordial world, the remaining Khanate Taoist priests had basically all come. This Tao discourse was destined to be an unprecedented prosperity in the history of the primordial world. It would go down in the annals of history and fascinate the future generations. Similarly, after this Tao discourse ended, there would be many almighty experts in the 3 realms who would understand their own path of Tao. From there, they would take the crucial step to transcend everything and cultivate to the realm of primordial chaos Dalio Jinxian. And just as the Taoist priests were discussing Tao in the Daluo sky, Feng Zichen's original body had quietly arrived in the depths of the ultimate ruins. Together with the mental demon of the ultimate ruins, they entered the future holy land of the demonic Tao, the eternal demon abyss. Is this the holy land of the demonic Tao? It's really different from the immortal Tao. After stepping into the eternal demon abyss, Feng Zichen looked around and said, unlike the holy land of the immortal Tao, the demon abyss was filled with evil qi, yin qi, evil qi, and other filthy qi. These filthy qi combined with the Khanate qi and turned into a strange and unpredictable demonic qi. It had the characteristics of blurring one's mind and eroding one's vitality. This demonic qi was the opposite of immortal qi. Moreover, its greatest danger was that it could pollute the innate qi. If the demonic qi was allowed to leak out without proper management, it wouldn't take long for the blessed land to be corroded by the demonic qi and become a demonic land. After looking at the eternal demon abyss a few more times, Feng Zichen said, this demon abyss is really the nemesis of the immortal Tao. I can faintly sense that this place is connected to the immortal Tao. I'm afraid that when the demon abyss is born, the immortal Tao's summer heat relief will come. In Feng Zichen's perception, he saw the future of the immortal Tao. The eternal demon abyss was born, and the immortal Tao's destiny was shaken. Then, a great demon came out of the demon abyss and constantly wreaked havoc in the world, becoming the enemy of the immortal Tao. The battle between the immortal Tao and the demon abyss would begin with the birth of the eternal demon abyss. Of course, the birth of the eternal demon abyss wasn't a good thing for the immortal Tao. It was a sign of their impending doom. But to the 3 realms and the wilderness, the birth of the demon abyss was a good thing. Firstly, the opposition of immortal Tao and demon could effectively reduce the number of immortals, which was beneficial to the world. Secondly, immortal Tao and demon were like yin and yang, mutually reinforcing and restraining each other. The two opposed each other but were not unified, which was beneficial to stabilizing the world and promoting the development of the 3 realms. Thirdly, which was also the most important point, the birth of the eternal demon abyss could relieve the pressure on the 3 realms. It would allow the evil qi, tribulation qi, evil qi, turbid qi, and other filthy qi to have a new outlet. It could be said that as long as the eternal demon abyss existed, it would be like the sinkhole constantly swallowing the waste produced by the world, thus delaying the arrival of the final tribulation. The birth of the eternal demon abyss was a crucial link in the evolution of the world. And Feng Zichen came to the sinkhole to help the sinkhole and inner demon perfect the eternal demon abyss, allowing it to truly be born. That's right, the 3 realms had been around for more than 200,000 years, but the eternal demon abyss was still the same, incomparably illusory. It was still illusory, and there were no signs of it being born. The sinkhole and inner demon used all means to strengthen the eternal demon abyss's origin, but there was no effect. The eternal demon abyss was like a giant eater, not rejecting anything, swallowing everything, but there was no growth. The bottomless ruin and heart demon made some deductions and discovered that although the eternal demon abyss shouldered a heavy responsibility, its opportunity to appear in the world was not in this cataclysm, but in the next cataclysm, accompanied by the rise of the demonic path. The sky demon Tao and heavenly immortal Tao were mutually reinforcing and counteracting. Now that the heavenly immortal Tao was about to flourish, the sky demon Tao would naturally also flourish. And this opportunity to flourish should be when the heavenly immortal Tao was at its most prosperous, and it was the beginning of its decline. If it was not the next tribulation, it would be the tribulation after that. But the impatient sinkhole and inner demon could not wait until the next tribulation. The eternal demon abyss was related to their Tao. If it could not be born, then the two would not be able to attain Tao. Moreover, by the time the eternal demon abyss was born in the next tribulation, it would be too late. After the Daluo heavenly Tao debate, the strength of the celestial sect would rise to a whole level, and there might even be many primordial chaos Tao masters. At that time, without the primordial chaos Tao masters, even if the demon Tao could flourish, what could they do? Facing the celestial sect with many primordial chaos Tao masters, what could the demon Tao do? Wouldn't they be at the mercy of the celestial sect? As for the heavenly Tao wanting the demon Tao to flourish, that was simple. Flourishing for a day was still flourishing. Just put on a show and let the demon Tao run rampant for a period of time. Then find a reason to turn the world upside down and reverse the heavenly Tao. In an instant, the demon Tao could decline from flourishing and fall into the dust. A Daxing without a master overseeing it was like a castle in the air, a reflection of the moon in the water. It was all illusory and unrealistic, could be destroyed at any time. After flourishing, the demon Tao would fall into the dust. As the two great sect masters of the sky demon Tao, if they could end up well, their fates would naturally be miserable. They might not die, but they would definitely not be able to escape the fate of being suppressed forever. Other than that, it was not over. If they were really suppressed by the experts of the celestial sect, then with the temperament of the great masters of the celestial sect, both the sky demon and the sky demon could imagine their days after being sealed. The great mediums of the celestial sect of wonders wouldn't mind using their names to stir up trouble in the world. Moreover, after they were done using them, they would plant all kinds of shit on the two of them. It was too miserable. Even if they were sealed, they would not be able to find peace. From time to time, they would be dragged out by the great masters of the celestial sect and become the targets of everyone in the world. How could the sky demon and the sky demon accept such a future? Therefore, they wanted to go against the heavens and change their fate, causing the eternal demon abyss to be born in advance. They wanted to accumulate as much power as they could to achieve the realm of the primordial chaos Daluo Jinxian before the demon Tao flourished. Of course, the sky demon Tao with only two primordial chaos Daluo Jinxian could not be a match for the celestial sect, but they had the ability to deal with the primordial chaos Tao master of the celestial sect. Yes, they had the ability to flip the table. In the future, even if the celestial sect defeated the sky demon Tao, they would not dare to force the two Tao masters of the sky demon Tao too much. After all, if two primordial chaos Daluo Jinxian self-destructed at the same time, they could at least blow up half of the three realms. The primordial chaos Tao master of the celestial sect had scruples about this, so he would not dare to force the Tao master of the sky demon Tao too much. As for the method to restrain the self-destruction, self-destruction was the last desperate move of a cultivator. If it was so easy to restrain, it would not be called a method of mutual destruction. If one wanted to stop the enemy from self-destruction, there was only one way, and that was to suddenly burst out with a power several times stronger than the enemy at the moment of self-destruction, and kill them by force. In this way, self-destruction would naturally be resolved. The way to deal with self-destruction was to interrupt it with a stronger power. Sounded easy, but it was not easy to do. The sky demon and the sky demon had a good idea, but their power was limited. Even if they used all their means, they could not cause the eternal demon abyss to be born in advance. As a last resort, the two of them went to the main body, Feng Zichen. Feng Zichen thought about how to create the eternal demon abyss for several days, and indeed came up with a way, but it was not easy to execute. The main reason was that he was afraid of attracting the attention of the celestial sect. The birth of the eternal demon abyss was bound to affect the destiny of the immortal path. Therefore, if it was forcefully created, it would inevitably arouse the vigilance of the celestial sect masters. If they were not careful, the celestial sect masters would personally come to the sky demon abyss and destroy it. At that time, as one of the leaders of the righteous path, Feng Zichen would not be able to help the sky demon abyss. For this reason, he could help the sky demon abyss create the eternal demon abyss, but he had to find an opportunity when the celestial sect masters were not around. The Daluo heavenly Tao debate was born for this reason. It was basically impossible to wait for the celestial sect masters to leave the three realms of their own accord. But if there was no opportunity, it could be created. Feng Zichen thought about it, and thought of opening the Daluo Heavenly Tao. In the name of spying on the Great Tao, he invited all the Taoist priests of the wilderness to discuss the Tao. In one fell swoop, he summoned all the masters of the celestial sect to the Daluo Heavenly Tao debate. Just as everyone was focused on the Tao debate and had no time to worry about the three realms, Feng Zichen slipped away and quietly left the boundless starry sky, came to the Sky Demon Abyss, and began his plan, helping the Sky Demon Abyss and the celestial sect open up. At this time, everyone's thoughts were on how to attain the Tao. How could they be distracted to care about the three realms? If they were distracted and did not catch that fleeting spark of the Great Tao, missing the opportunity to attain the Tao, wouldn't it be too late to regret it? Therefore, taking advantage of this rare opportunity, Feng Zichen could rest assured and help the celestial sect open up the eternal demon abyss. Following the celestial sect and the celestial sect, Feng Zichen walked forward for a while more until he arrived at the deepest part of the eternal demon abyss. When he arrived, he saw endless demonic qi gathering in the depths of the abyss. It seemed to have a life of its own, throbbing constantly. Upon closer inspection, he discovered that it wasn't demonic qi that was throbbing, but the Khanate Tao fetuses in the depths of the demonic qi. There were a total of 9 Khanate Tao fetuses, and each one was surrounded by terrifying demonic shadows. These were Khanate godfiends born from the abyss, true and complete Khanate godfiends that belonged to the demonic Tao. They were also the key to the future prosperity of the Sky Demon Tao. These Khanate Devil's fetus were born together with the other Khanate godfiends of the three realms. However, while the Khanate godfiends of the three realms had been born for many years, the Khanate Devil's fetus here showed no signs of birth. The reason for this was the influence of the eternal demon abyss. These 9 Khanate Devil's fetus were all born from the core of the eternal demon abyss. But now, even the eternal demon abyss itself hadn't reached perfection. So where would it find the extra power to nurture these Khanate demon gods? Therefore, although these Khanate Devil's fetus had been around for many years, there were no signs of birth at all. If they wanted to be born, they would have to wait until the eternal demon abyss was truly born. Only then would the abyss have the power to nurture them. To be able to nurture 9 Khanate demon gods at once, this eternal demon abyss is truly extraordinary. No wonder you can't nurture them. Feng Zichen sighed with emotion as he looked at the 9 Khanate Devil's fetus. In the three realms, the only place other than the World Tree that could nurture 9 Khanate godfiends at once was Kunlun Mountain. And now, the eternal demon abyss had done the same. What did this mean? Even if the eternal demon abyss couldn't compare to Kunlun Mountain, it wasn't far off. You're tuning in to the Legend of the Vagabond YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.